believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky France, and a great conversation I have for you today. Today we have Libertarian, host of the Liberty Lockdown Podcast, co-host of the best political show with Luke from We Are Change. I'm talking about Clint Russell. Clint's a very well-known libertarian and podcaster who has done some amazing interviews on both his shows. He's good friends and has interviewed Dave Smith, Kim Iverson, presidential candidate Vivek. He's interviewed Adam Curry from the No Agenda show. He's debated Destiny. He's been on the Jimmy Dore show. And that's just to name a few amazing accomplishments by Clint Russell and amazing conversations worth listening to. Hopefully this podcast is no different and is another amazing and interesting conversation with Clint Russell. I think it definitely delivered. It was a long and interesting conversation where we went everywhere and anywhere, and I'm so glad we both had the time to ride the wave while the conversation was flowing. But before we get into that conversation, let me remind you this is a Value for Valley show. If you get any value out of these discussions and interesting guests and thought-provoking conversations I try to put together for you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. Like I always remind you guys, you can rate the show, review the show, tell people about the show, leave comments, and all that helps fight against the algorithms that suppress shows and conversations like these. But if you can financially support the show, and remember, no donation or no amount is too little. But if you are in a good financial situation and in a position to help, please consider doing so. You can send a one-time donation to our Venmo account or a one-time donation to our PayPal account. I also have a crypto wallet if you want to send Ethereum or Bitcoin. We have a Patreon page if you want to support us monthly, and that's one of the best ways of supporting the show because it's consistent income to help pay for the bandwidth and storage and all the expenses that come with running a podcast. And everyone has a couple go-to podcasts, a couple go-to shows, and I know many of you have the Ripple Effect Podcast as one of your go-to shows. So if you're one of the thousands of people who download a episode once it's available and you're in a good financial situation, please consider helping the show out. Your donations help keep the show going and growing. And just like you guys, I have go-to shows like The High Wire, like The Corbett Report, and many others. And that's why those shows that I consistently listen to, I also consistently donate to show my appreciation for all the work they put in to their content. Other ways of supporting the show is checking out our merch store. We have an amazing merch store with hats, stickers, mugs, and much more. Please check it out. Everything's reasonably priced. You'll get stuff really quickly. It's all high quality stuff. It's a great conversation starter. If you're wearing a podcast shirt, often people will ask you about it, and it's a great way of sparking an interesting conversation. And everyone likes the Hulk Smash design, so check that out. It looks good on so many different colors. So get some cool merch and also support the Ripple Effect Podcast at the same time. And of course, I have a couple sponsors. One of the most important ones is my first one. It's Content Safe. Matt from Content Safe created an amazing service for content creators. If you're a YouTuber, streamer, podcaster, anything like that, he has a service where he can link all your video channels together. You upload to one of your video channels and then magically they all sync, and that video thumbnail and description appears on all your video channels. So it saves you tons of uploading time. He also runs my website and helps me with a bunch of other IT stuff. So if you're interested in any of these services, if you're a podcaster, YouTuber, content creator, streamer, hit up Matt from Content Safe. Let him know you're a listener of the Ripple Effect Podcast, and he'll definitely help you out. My other sponsor is the University of Reason, created by Richard Grove, who is a historian, philosopher, libertarian. documentary filmmaker, author, writer, host of the Grand Theft World podcast, and his resume goes on and on and on. But I'll stop there. He's created the University of Reason to help people who are stuck in the everyday grind find a libertarian, freedom-minded community to expand knowledge, expand on some skills, learn some new skills, expand your toolbox, and help you invest in yourself. If you feel like you're a hamster on a wheel running in place, if you feel like you're at a crossroads in life and you just need a change, please check out the University of Reason. Use the link in the show description or on my website and help yourself and support the Ripple Effect podcast at the same time. And then my last sponsor is Element Electrolytes, created and formulated by a OG in the health and nutrition community. It's a product I use just about every day. And the mastermind behind Element Electrolytes, Rob Wolf, has been on my podcast. He's been on all the major health and nutrition podcasts. He's been on Rogan's podcast a bunch. He was also one of the first best-selling authors talking about the paleo diet. He was also one of the first people to open up a CrossFit gym in the U.S. So he's been around the most elite athletes and greatest minds in sports, health, and nutrition for a long time. And he used all that knowledge and wisdom and research to put together Element Electrolytes. It has no artificial colors, no artificial sweeteners or flavors. It has the right dosages so you can optimize your body and mind. And I know there's a lot of electrolyte options out there, but they don't have enough of the electrolytes you need to really get the most out of your body and mind and to help with the symptoms that many of us deal with due to dehydration, like muscle fatigue, cramping, headaches, and many other things due to not enough electrolytes and not enough hydration. To really be hydrated and get the most out of your body, you need electrolytes. Element Electrolytes also won't kick you out of fasting or ketosis if you're doing those diets. They also have some amazing flavors that go with coffee so you can stay hydrated while getting your caffeine. And if you want to learn more about this product, check out their website using the link in the show description or on my website. Get a free gift with every purchase when using that link. Check out all the science that's on their website explaining and backing their formula. Or, of course, you can always go on my website, search the Ripple Effect podcast with Rob Wolf, and you can find his past appearance when we go into detail on how he created the product. But amazing product. It's a great way of staying hydrated, a healthy way of staying hydrated, and you can get an amazing product and support one of your favorite podcasts. So that's it, guys. Remember, Telegram group chat. If you want to join the Telegram group chat, those links are on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. You can connect with myself and other listeners of the podcast. Also, check out my other show, The Union of the Unwanted, which is a roundtable panel discussion type of show, which I co-host with Midnight Mike from the OBDM show, Charlie Robinson, and Sam Tripoli. And that's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Clint Russell, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
I'm born and raised San Diego, California. Spent over 35 years there. Absolutely loved it. Friends, family, everything. And I was spiraled into fleeing my home state during the COVID lockdowns, which was heartbreaking, obviously. But that's why I started Liberty Lockdown, the show, and started to speak out. Got involved with the Libertarian Party. Got involved with kind of the broader anti-lockdown movement because there were so few people that were actually standing up for themselves during that period. So that's kind of how I became a name in this world, whatever that means. But for my origin story, I came from a kind of broken home. I had my mom and my dad got divorced when I was 2. My mom got remarried, and I had a fantastic stepdad from the time I was 5 on. But my biological dad went out and he was an entrepreneur. He ran a nightclub, so he would see me one weekend a month, and I would go out there, and on this long drive to go to his nightclub, he was one of the early adherents to libertarianism. So he would tell me all these stories about our founding fathers and how hard fought liberty is to come by. So I think even though I didn't spend much time with him growing up, it certainly had an impact on me. It made me really value just human freedom, and that's part of the reason that these lockdowns were so brutal to me. But I was an entrepreneur myself once I was an adult, and I started a mortgage company, and I was doing really well. I was very successful, so I was in a really good position financially when 2020 hit, and I decided to shut down my company and become a full-time political activist, speaking out against what the government had become. And then slowly but surely, Tom Woods and Dave Smith and a bunch of my heroes kind of took me under their wing. Scott Horton, a bunch of people, and that kind of helped get my name out there to people. And I also have a bit of a conspiracy mind, just not so much because I'm a conspiracy theorist, but rather because we're being conspired against very, very broadly. So that brought me into the Sam Tripoli realm, and it's just been a wild ride. But I feel as if much of the things that we talk about on our programs are coming out of the conspiracy realm into the news realm. If you watch Vivek Ramaswamy's campaign, for instance, he's talking about like a dozen of the things that you probably would have been kicked off of Twitter for a few years ago. So I feel like the Overton window is shifting, and everybody in this world is playing a small role in it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you're right. I mean, that's kind of one of the few good things that came out of COVID was the fact that a lot of taboo topics became less taboo and much more realistic. I mean, I'm always kind of embarrassed of how quickly people will get back to their regular pattern of thinking, though, because like when the Jeffrey Epstein thing happened, I remember for years we would talk about people, the elite in politics and fashion and in all different types of industries, just being involved and connected to these things. The Clintons and all the Clinton Foundation and all that stuff, the Franklin scandal, and people would kind of look at you like you're crazy, and then once Jeffrey Epstein became a household name, because for a long time, he wasn't a household name. It was a name you would hear about on a show like Alex Jones or, on my show or, many of these other alternative media platforms. But once it became a household name, I'm like, wow. I'm like, this is going to just shatter everybody's worldview. Everybody who thought that we lived in this, this world where just like, yeah, the government just makes mistakes sometimes, and people just make mistakes. There's no evil in the world. I was hoping that now, like next time you bring up something that seems a little hard to digest or hard to believe or might put a crack in your worldview, you'd be more open to it because you've had this experience. Unfortunately, for many people, that's not the case. Like you bring up the next thing and they'll be like, no, that sounds crazy. I'm like, well, didn't like the Clintons and all these people that are connected to Jeffrey Epstein and the fact that he's been doing this forever and he's connected to Mossad and he's, Ghislaine Maxwell and her connections, and then all these things, like I'm like, it's like the craziest conspiracy ever. And I'm like, and we all watched it unfold in front of us. Like everybody knows he didn't kill himself. There's all these inconsistencies with the story. And yet, like, there's nobody's like, protesting that there should be an investigation or that these documents and his list and all these people linked to him should be exposed. So do you see that also where it's like, in a way, like you do see some progression in the right direction, but and then you also see some people who are just so socially engineered and the propaganda is so deep in their DNA that they're just unsavable?
Well, yeah. I mean, if not unsavable, but certainly they revert. There is a reversion to the meme when it comes to the mean, rather, when it comes to assessing the latest new thing. For me, because I'm a hardcore anti-war person, that's my greatest frustration is with the newest thing when it comes to the military-industrial complex. It's like, okay, we have all of these examples of being lied into war, from Gulf of Tonkin to Lusitania to WMDs. It's like you have all of these examples, but they come out with a narrative about the war in Ukraine and you're all in. They come out with a narrative about Israel and Gaza and you're all in. And it's just, it's so frustrating, man. So yeah, that's kind of what my job is, I feel like, is to just destroy the narratives in the early days of every new war. that they're trying to get us involved in. And I don't take a lot of joy in it because I wish I didn't have to do it. I wish people would just hear what the news is saying and go like, F you. You've lied to me so many times. You've bankrupted our nation. You've killed so many innocent people. You've had so many American troops come home and kill themselves because they realized in hindsight what they had participated in. Why do I have to explain this to you? Why do you even take what they have to say seriously at all? But I guess that's still the paradigm that we function in. So yeah, we have to dismantle these narratives in real time. It's frustrating though.
Well, yeah, it's concerning because the one of the issues I see is that people pretend that they're for something, and then the second that maybe the other team or a politician they don't like is for the same thing, all of a sudden they like pump the brakes, and it's like, wait, are you for this issue because you're actually for this issue, or are you just defending your team? And in many cases, they're just defending their team and whatever ideology they want to push. And you saw it with COVID. You see it with anti-war stuff, like, like you said, like the left and the right, and like whatever ideology you might be in. Everybody can kind of, or at least everybody should agree that like war is bad, and like and like you said, like historically, it's one of the most obvious things we've been lied to. You can go all the way back to Smedley Butler and War is a Racket, and you look at all the coups in Latin America and Guatemala, the United Fruit Company, you look at Iran, like we openly discuss these historical events. Like, yeah, we got involved in their politics, we got involved with their election. We put in power somebody that we wanted, and put a puppet government in, and then all the proxy wars, right? Like, I mean, it almost seems like there's been no war or conflict in the world that some of the world powers weren't involved, right? They weren't funding one side or the other side, and they weren't trying to provoke the outcome that they wanted. And so it's like that's like one of the most obvious things. And I feel like one thing that was concerning about COVID was that, like, everybody, once we started talking anti-war, like you had libertarians anti-war, you had people on the left anti-war, but then with COVID, it was like it shattered all that. It was like, because they did such a great job of making this political, that people hated Trump so much. I mean, I had Jesse Ventura on my show years ago, and him, I had his son even on, and I became friends with Sean Stone. Sean Stone used to do that show, Watching the Hawks on RT with Tyrell Ventura, and I had all those guys on. And then when COVID happened, I could just see, and Jesse had the same issue that a lot of people had. Their dislike of Trump blinded them from what the evidence was telling them. And same thing happened. And it's funny, Charlie Robinson and I talked about this in regards to Dennis McKenna. You know who Terrence McKenna is, the DMT guy, right? So Dennis and I became friends. He was on a few times back in the day, and then last time he was on was like the first time, I believe it was around the first time Trump was running for president. And I just wanted to talk about, like, do a show on alternative medicines and all the research that he dives deep into. And he goes on this giant anti-Trump rant. And Charlie and I, Charlie listened to the episode, and he like text messaged me, and we're laughing about it because I'm like, all I heard growing up, like listening to Rogan's show, is like, if we just give everybody DMT, like we could fix the universe. I'm like, this motherfucker has taken a lot of DMT, and I'm like, and the propaganda is still there. Like, it still has brainwashed them to believe that like Trump is a bad guy. And not to say I'm not a MAGA guy. I'm not defending him, but my point is, like, they have decided that one side is the good guy and Trump is a bad guy, and they simplified this whole discussion. And it was so deep rooted in his like liberal upbringing that you just can't, even psychedelics could not scratch away at that. And I think during, like, even the last Union of the Unwanted, there's a couple of things you and I were agreeing on that everybody was disagreeing with us on, and I can't remember which one was like. Do you remember what was it that
Yeah, I mean, it was just primarily them saying that Trump was controlled up, but not just controlled up, but like actually part of the regime, and you and I were kind of pushing back, saying, I don't think so. I don't think that you spy on him before he gets into power. I don't think you create fake dossiers. I don't think you try to coup him. I don't think you set up his supporters. I don't think that you have FBI lying on affidavits in order to spy on him. I don't think that you frame him for the things that the Biden administration is guilty of. Like there's just a litany of evidence that says that even though I'm same camp as you, not a Trump supporter, never voted for the dude. I think that he's not even that great of a president. I think that his downfall in 2020 was catastrophic, probably the worst year in American history, or at least in my lifetime, I should say. So yeah, but a lot of people, they just like there's a little bit of TDS on all sides. He's one of the most divisive characters I've ever encountered in my lifetime. I mean, maybe the most. And I mean, just to give a good example of this, the vaccines, like people were, when it was going to be rolled out under him, you had the Democrats saying, I would never touch that, not in a million years. Biden wins the election, and now the Trump supporters are the ones that I'm never going to touch that. I mean, it's just amazing. It's immediately tribal. And another good example is Ukraine. It's like the anti-war left. They because the Biden administration is the one that's telling them we have to fund and arm this thing. They're all on board. And also because they've been psychologically prepared for this because of the Russia collusion stuff with Trump. So they are convinced that Russia is the gravest danger to them on Earth, not because of their nuclear arsenal of 6,000 advanced nuclear weapons, but rather because he ran $100,000 worth of ads on Facebook, and that is the difference maker. That's what made them have to suffer under 4 years of Trump. It's just totally diluted thinking, but that's how a lot of people really genuinely think.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember seeing on your Twitter like some of the people that drive you nuts, and one of them is Sam Harris, and Sam Harris has always been like on my list of this guy gets way too much credit for being intellect. He gets way too much credit. I'm like, if you really observe what he's saying, he is very good at just defending bad ideas. Like he'll be wrong, but he's just really good at defending them. And being good at arguing or being good at defending bad ideas doesn't mean you're right. And he's notorious for it. But Hitchens, Hitchens, I remember reading his book. I remember watching the documentary, The Trials of Henry Kissinger. I'm like, this guy gets it. Like, it's all a facade. Like, we've been lied to about every conflict in the world. We've always had other motives. And then, when the Iraq war was around the corner, his dislike of organized religion blurred his vision on it being another lie, just like he documented in all the war lies in The Trials of Henry Kissinger. And instead of noticing that, like, it's the same pattern, it's the same lie again, he's like, no, let's get them, and it's like, to me, it's a missing ingredient that people it's like an invisible ingredient. Like, people don't realize emotions is a ingredient that is mixed in with your decision making. And
big time.
Most people just think, oh, I'm just a logical creature. I've come to this conclusion completely based on the evidence and the facts and my research. And it's like, you were talking about your upbringing. So many things that happens in our upbringing, that's why, I try to be we also have a little small business, and luckily I keep it small so then I can be as present as possible with my kids and my family, and be around them as much as I can, and be involved in their lives. Because I know, like, if I'm not inspiring them or answering their questions or influencing their worldview, somebody else is. It could be YouTube, it could be Facebook, it could be, commercials, it could be Disney. So I want to be as involved as possible and have as big of an impact as possible. But a lot of people who have these strong ideas, like, if you start dissecting their origin story, and you start peeling back the layers, you start finding out, like, okay, it's because of this, or it's because of that. I remember having this conversation with this kid where he listened to my podcast, and we were like on the same level with everything, and then we started talking about unions, and he lost his mind. Like, I'm like, all logic went out the window. He was so pro union, it was insane. And then come to find out, like, his dad was like, head of like whatever, carpenters union or whatever. And I'm like, okay, like this is so deep rooted in you that like you can't see the other perspective. I'm like, you've been molded to believe this is your worldview, and this is, you know, what's right and this is what's wrong. And so many people are like that. And with social engineering, with TV and all these things, and you know, how much of it do you think is a perfect or purpose? It's on purpose to just dis disregard the importance of family and being a parent and being, you know, listen, I'm not a huge Nick Fuentes fan, but when he talks about like the most important job for a woman is being a mother, like I 100% agree with him. Like you can, like he gets like criticized for that. I'm like, why is that something to criticize? Like you're not telling a woman that she can't pursue a career, but whatever job you do is no job it will be more important than raising and molding, you know, a little child and the future of the world and the planet.
Well, I'll even add to that, and I'd say that the most important job that a man can do is be a father. You know, like I am a huge proponent, even though I'm a libertarian, and you know, I'm not in the GOP. I very much align with the kind of conservative family value principle. I just think that it because it is the foundational building block of civilization, and it nullifies the necessity for a state. Like if you have a strong family unit that and you're looking after your relatives, your grandparents, or the grandparents are looking after the grandkids, like that is a social safety net that is voluntary in nature. It absolutely supplants the need for the forced state apparatus to replace it. So I think that it's crystal clear to me that there has been a war against family formation in this country for a very long time, and you can go back, you know, all the way to the 1900s and kind of the Malthusian thought process that we're overpopulated. I think that plays a huge part of this, is that there are very powerful people in positions of, you know, authority, unfortunately, that think that the world is overpopulated, and obviously if you dissolve the family unit, that means that you have less kids, and it also means that you turn towards the state more readily, and that all of that benefits them, it benefits their goals. So uh, some of it is also, I think, natural, in that as society advances, uh, there is this tendency to have less children. But from a libertarian vantage point, I think that the biggest driver of dissolving the family unit has been the Federal Reserve and the debasement of our currency, and ultimately the inflationary process that we've languished under for the past 100 years. Is that we can't afford to not both work. The mom and dad both have to go to work because the inflation is slowly eroding our purchasing power. Even though you think you're getting ahead because, well, I was making $70,000 5 years ago, now I'm making 80,000. I'm obviously doing better. You're not. You're actually not. If you actually look at the inflation over those periods, you are making less money in terms of purchasing power than you were 5 years ago. So I think that is why, you know, a lot of people, you know, look at libertarians and they'll say, "Oh, you're so wonky. Why do you guys even talk about central banking?" It's like, no, it's the most important thing. It is ultimately the reason the era of, or the century of central banking coincided with the century of total war. That's not a coincidence. Like so much of what is killing us civilizationally is a product of the central bank. So, you know, set aside the economic arguments and just focus on the reality of it. That's what's happening. Like if you're not an economic, like there's lots of people that listen to libertarians talk and they'll just say, "I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't know what you mean with all this economic stuff." Okay, fine. Then just listen to what I'm saying. If the purchasing power of your dollar is decreasing, is that going to make it more likely or less likely that you and your wife are going to both go to work? The answer is yes. Obviously, if you're making less money or you can't buy as much stuff, both of you are going to have to go to work. Who's going to raise your kid? Well, now it's daycare. Now it's elementary school. Now it's, you know, it's the public schooling system. Then they indoctrinate your kids. Your kids come out, they have a totally different worldview and value system than you do, and you ask yourself why. Well, this stuff matters. It matters very, very deeply, and this is why I'm so passionate about it. Is that it is really, you know, tearing at the fabric of our civilization. Is that we are constantly ice skating uphill, and it doesn't have to be that way. prices ought to be decreasing for goods as innovation increases, output increases, quality increases. It ought to be driving down prices as competition increases. The government stifles competition through its regulatory process, and then it debases your currency through the central banks and the treasury. Neither of those things have to exist. So this is why I'm an abolitionist.
Yeah, and James Corbett, his Fed documentary, Century of Enslavement. I remember when we talked about it, I was like, James, that's such a great title because that's exactly what it does. It enslaves you. And that's why they put you in debt right out of college. So that way you have to work that crappy job to pay off those bills. And then once you're stuck in that cycle of like, okay, now I have this giant bill, this balance that I have to try to pay off every month, every week. That means I have to stay at this job. I don't have the flexibility to move. I don't have the flexibility to try new jobs, do something, just do something, just out of the normal and experience something new. And they enslave you right from college. And so many of the kids out of college aren't even doing jobs that have anything to do with what they, what their major was. And it's a waste of money. So many success stories. I mean, how many people are famous or successful business owners who have very little to no college experience and really just got thrown in the real world and just learned life experiences. That's why we would say like street smart compared to book smart, because book smart just means you're really good at regurgitating some information in a book. I mean, some of my most book smart friends, if we sat at a table and we're going out to eat and we're having a whiskey and hanging out talking, wouldn't come off as the most intelligent. But based on their resume and where they got their diplomas and where they got, then they should be the most intelligent person at the table. Right. But that's not the case. We reward people who just play by the rules and just regurgitate information.
Yeah, well, people that thrive in a indoctrination mill are obviously not going to be the movers and shakers when it comes to the entrepreneurial realm or the punditry space. Like I'm very fortunate in that I was very good in school, but I'd never had to try. So I didn't have to actually like break myself down and become like a cog in the machine. I just kind of like intrinsically would know stuff. I don't even really understand it. But I was always very adamantly opposed to kind of the power structure. I didn't respect my teachers. I always found them to be much less intelligent than I was, if I'm being honest. So like I had a few good teachers like that treated me like a human being and seemed to appreciate the dialogue and the pushback. Like every class I was ever in, I always was like, I wanted to argue, I wanted to debate, I wanted to like actually see where are you getting your assessment of things. It was always kind of just like a given that what the teacher said had to be the truth. And it was like, to me, that didn't hold up because these people weren't very impressive. So like, why should I actually take, it's in a book written by some other unimpressive academic? Like none of this is impressive to me. So I encountered a few good teachers, particularly when I went to business school in college. I really met some fantastic professors that were like former CEOs of, Pepsi and things like that. And they loved me. Like it was the first time I actually encountered teachers that really, really appreciated someone who was like alive. I think they were just so accustomed to everyone being, dead to the world and just listening to what they had to say and repeating it back at them. So I genuinely believe that our schooling system is disastrous. Like it is not there to engage our minds. It is not there to inspire us or to motivate us towards our entrepreneurial endeavors, really pursuing our passions. Because I think that's the most tragic thing about all of this is that almost everybody I know has some passion of some sort. And almost nobody I know is employed in that lane, like almost nobody. and that is I just think that's a catastrophe for civilization, that you do not have the vast majority of people that are pursuing what they're most passionate about. And this is why I'm very fortunate that everything I've done in my life has been in pursuit of my highest passion. From the mortgage industry, I loved deploying investor capital and making, retirees wealthy. I loved giving people opportunities to either purchase homes or develop properties. I love the process of underwriting it and making sure that this worked. It just was like, it was perfect for my mind. I also was compensated well. I enjoyed that. But and then now I am like absolutely in my wheelhouse. Every day I wake up and I am just fucking thrilled to do what I'm doing. I work almost all day every day, and I never feel as if I'm working. I feel like this is basically my retirement gig, and I love it. I love it. I love it more, and I work more than when I was a money manager with $100 million plus that I had to deploy. You know, like this is my life. That's how engaged I am in what I'm doing. And I just think that our entire education system, our entire indoctrination process is counter to, fomenting that. It's counter to trying to lead people down that path or encourage them down that path. And I just think it's been very bad for us economically. And I think, that is really what made America great, is that we were one of the few places on earth that did allow, dreamers to get after it. And now it just seems as if we're not really doing that very much. And this is another big reason that I've made the ESG and the DEI stuff a big aspect of my show, because I come from the entrepreneurial world and I really understood this immediately. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, this is why we're getting a decrease in the quality of products. This is why we're getting advertisements that are insulting to their customer base. Like all of this stuff, all of these these questions I had, as soon as I saw ESG, I was like, I get it. I know exactly what's happening. This is a top-down dictated program through the United Nations, through the central bankers, through the federal government, that is completely counter to what a genuine free market would be accomplishing. But I think that people are starting to wake up to it a little bit, and ultimately, a top-down, centrally planned economy will fail. So it's just up to us to decide, what will be there in the ashes.
I couldn't agree with you more in regards to schooling. I have very similar just background in regards to, I always say I was never brainwashed in school because I never paid attention. And so it's hard to brainwash somebody who's not paying attention. But I would push back on everything. I mean, I pushed back at going to Sunday school, CCD. I'm Portuguese. I was born in Portugal, came to America when I was young, and my parents threw me in Sunday school, and then also in just public school. I was always a little bit behind because I was learning the language at a young age. And then I'm like, a lot of times I felt like you. I'm like, I'm not that smart, but damn, this teacher seems like an idiot. It's like, I just always felt like, I'm like, it's like the blind leading the blind. I'm like, this is, it was just ridiculous. I never really felt like any of the teachers were really mentally stimulating. And then I had a handful of them, like you said, very similar to your story, that, I connected with, that looked at my pushback or my questioning things as a not a flaw, but a good aspect of my character and my personality. And it meant I was curious, and it meant that I was willing to debate and have my ideas challenged. And
it means you're thoughtful. It means you're actually thinking while you're in class. Why would a teacher not want that? It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And well, I think it's amazing how many teachers, and I know a lot of people who are public school teachers, how many teachers aren't good with kids, or some of them, I would even argue, don't even like kids. I think it's just like parenting. Like, I think a lot of people like the idea, the fantasy of it all, like, oh, having a beautiful little child and dressing them up and all this stuff. And then you realize like all the work that comes with it. And you're just like, oh, this sucks. How about my parents watch the kids, or how about we put them in daycare? And it's the same thing with teaching. Like, oh, people are like, I love kids. I just want to, I would love to be a teacher and teach kids. And then you realize like there's some shithead kids. And, I always say there's not really shithead kids, or shithead parents who create shithead kids. And but those shithead parents were also raised by shithead parents. So it's just exactly a cycle that needs to be broken. But it's just one of those things where, like, I think the fantasy of like being around kids and teaching, it's great. And then once you get kids that are a little bit difficult, like I was not an easy kid. Like I always felt, I was first, I felt like an immigrant, and then I got into metal. And my brother and I played in the metal band. I skateboard, I BMX, um, and I just always felt like a little bit like an outsider. And so I don't know. I just felt like if I was ready unliked before I even stepped into the class, and and then maybe that kind of rubbed people the wrong way. But the teachers who actually like gave me a chance, I was like their favorite student because I actually wanted to engage and I wanted to have conversations and I wanted to learn from their wisdom and I wanted to actually discuss things and know where where their philosophies and worldviews came from. So what do you think sparked that? Because I try to self-analyze myself all the time, and when I'm on other shows, people will ask me like, what do you think, caused you to not be brainwashed and go against the grain? And I think probably every time I've been asked that question, my answers maybe slightly changed because I'm always like, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. Like, what do you think? Well, why do you think you didn't just fall in line with everybody else?
Well, I know that I've always been a very independent person. Like I had some clashes with my parents growing up, even like they would, I was very stubborn. I would, same thing I did with the teachers I did with my parents. I was always like challenging them. So I think some of it's intrinsic. I think some of it's, genetic. I think that my parents were also, very thoughtful, inquisitive people. So there was some sort of genetic predisposition for it, but then also the way that they raised me, they fostered it, they encouraged it. And they also were very skeptical of, things that they were being told. They didn't really take them at face value. They always wanted to, double check and make sure. Also, I was very fortunate in that both my mom and my dad and my stepdad all had, kind of a business mindset or entrepreneurial savvy. I think it really, for me, it boils down to how I was raised. I'm very, very fortunate that I had not just two, but three incredible parents that absolutely, loved me to the end of the earth and encouraged, you know, kind of took what could have been perceived as flaws and tried to turn them into assets. Because in the public school system, much of who I was as a person naturally would have been perceived as a flaw. I remember, for instance, this is a funny story. When I was in second grade or first grade, or whenever you first learn how to write, and my teacher was teaching me how to do, just handwriting, and I would do like whatever was the most efficient in starting the next letter. I would just go to that. So I don't write how other people write. I don't do it. I don't know. I don't even, honestly, I have no idea how you're supposed to do it. I just know that my teacher told me very, very angrily that I was doing it wrong. And my mom was brought into the school because they wanted to hold me back. And she said, my kid is smarter than everybody that you're dealing with right now, and there is not a chance in hell that you're holding him back. Um, I almost get choked up thinking about like how beautiful that is, that your parent would just like, ride in there, and even though you have this authority figure that's telling them, no, the way that they're doing that is wrong because this is how the book tells us we have to do it. And I just think that was such an important moment of, recognizing that just because the system says that you have to do it this way doesn't mean that you do. And I think that was a very inspirational moment for me that, yeah, like, no, just because I do things differently from other people doesn't mean that I'm flawed. Doesn't mean that you need to put me on, SSRIs or ADD medication or anything like that. And I think that is like the most important thing that a parent can do is like be there for their child, correct them when necessary, but also do not stifle, what makes them special. And I think that's a really important thing that far too few parents have the wherewithal to do today, because so many of them went through the entire public education system and through academia, and they're being force fed these narratives that if you challenge any sort of mainstream story, that you're a conspiracy theorist. Like they're trying to drive out critical thought broadly. So if you're fortunate enough to have parents that have not fallen victim to that, I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, I think it was James Corbett who said, and I reuse his line all the time that schools, they're supposed to be a place to teach you how to think. Instead, they teach you what to think. And
Yep.
you're right. And it's something that you hit on before too, which is connected to this, is like instead of seeing a child that's different or trying something different or like seeing it as a flaw. How about we, like you said, see it as an asset? Like you have good critical thinking skills, you have good problem solving skills. You are developing the part of your brain that is trying to figure out how do I make this writing thing more efficient and
Yeah.
easier for me. Like
I
we
was I was I was innovating, for God's sakes.
exactly. And instead of and we should have been teachers should have been celebrating that, not looking at you like you're doing something wrong. But like you said, they're just a victim of the same system. So
Right.
it's like, to them it's like, oh, you're just supposed to do what you're told. And that's the other thing too, like something you said that I feel like is so important about this whole thing about retirement, right? Like if we're all doing things we enjoyed, and if we built a system where we tell kids like, what's your knack? Like, what do you like? What do you enjoy doing? Like, let's pursue that. Let's like focus on that because like you said, like if you're doing something you enjoy, it never feel. It's obviously been said numerous of times before, but it's like it's true. Like if you're doing something you love, you never work a day in your life. You never feel like it's work. This podcast, I will spend hours. I will even spend hours when I'm at work doing my day job. And I'll spend hours working on my podcast. I can stay up late uploading stuff. I can stay up late researching whatever. It never ever feels like work to me. And it's that's what kids should be pursuing. Like you should be pursuing things you love. And the problem is, and so there was a obviously who Brian Callen is,
Yep.
and so back in the day he used to have a podcast with this guy Hunter Motz. And Hunter Motz is a really fun guy to talk to, and we became good friends. And Brian Callen and Hunter Motz grew up together. And I actually even hosted a debate between him and Adam Kokesh a few times, just a friendly, and actually one time with Corbett too. It was just fun little back and forth. And but Hunter Motz had a book called The Straight A Conspiracy, and he wasn't a conspiratorial guy, but I think the title was because it kind of catches your attention with the title. But the conspiracy was that we're all capable of doing whatever we put our minds to. And if you love something and you're passionate about something, then you can do it. So like the person who's better at math than you is not because they have some inherent, DNA or talent or a way of thinking that comprehends math more than you. It's just they like math more than you, so they put more effort into their math, right? And I think in the book he talks about how like at a very if starting at like kindergarten or first grade, whatever it may be, they did this study where they asked kids like, how many of you guys find yourselves creative and have good imaginations? And like every kid raises their hand. And as you go up the grades, you ask the same question, less and less kids raise their hand. And it's like that makes perfect sense because I grew up playing music. I always loved doing creative things, and people would be like, I don't know how you write a song. I could never do that. And I'm like, yeah, you can. I'm like, when we're kids, we use our imagination. We use our creativity. We come up with games to play. We, especially, people our age who didn't have digital entertainment, you're outside coming up with creative things to do with your friends. And as you get older, the school system and the world tells you, hey, that's a waste of time. How about you focus on regurgitating this information and stop right. Wasting time on drawing or coloring or poetry or any of these other skateboarding or anything else. And then eventually you become this machine that just goes with the goes wherever you're told, and you never go against the grain, and you completely have turned off that imagination and creativity. And obviously with some help of fluoride they do that, but it's it's you could see it, but I feel like all kids have that capability, and it's like a well thought out plan to like slowly turn that off. And people like you and I, we just never turned it off.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's true. I certainly had periods of my life where it was diminished. But I mean, there's even labels for this. It's like you're acting like a child. Like you're a dreamer. You need to grow up. People say that a lot. I think that these are all sayings. I mean, unless it's like, okay, you're doing drugs and you're not doing anything with your life, you need to grow up. Okay, yeah, maybe that's a good good example of where that applies. But if you're like pursuing your passion, and like stand-up comics are a great example of this, because if you don't do it for a decade, you have very little chance of it ever becoming a career. Um, and in that decade, you're going to have almost everyone in your life telling you, you need to grow up, you need to go get a job, what are you doing, this is insane. Those are the dreamers, man. Those are the people that, and ultimately those are the people that I'm probably most inspired by. I've become good friends with Dave Smith, and to a lesser extent Sam Tripoli, and I just think the world of those guys. I think there's a reason that I find myself so in alignment with so many of the comedians in the world. It's like those are the people that never grew up. Those are the people that are still telling, dick and shit jokes, in their 40s. I'm like, y'all are some savages. You dealt with poverty, and you just, grinded for years and years and years in poverty to just because you enjoyed the creative process and you enjoyed making people laugh. And I think that's so beautiful. So yeah, I agree. I think that there are certainly different skill sets that we are naturally more inclined to, in my opinion, because like I don't I don't think that the reason I'm so bad at engineering is because it's not interesting to me, but rather because I'm probably just not very, like, my brain doesn't really function in that fashion, and maybe that's why I don't enjoy it. But regardless, I think that there is, with everybody, there is something that you excel at. And I've been fortunate in that there's a handful of things that I excel at, and a handful of things that I'm passionate about. And I'm just absolutely thrilled that I've been able to basically spend the entire 20 years of adulthood, striving towards that. And the reason that I think this is such an important thing is that, one, it provides tremendous joy to my existence. So I think it's tragic when that is driven out of people. But two, I think it's the best thing for civilization. I think that if you have an economy that's filled with fired up, inspired, innovative people, you're gonna live in a much better world. You're gonna have more Steve Jobs that are creating, products that ultimately revolutionize things. So that there's a multitude of reasons. It's not just because it's what I'm most passionate about and what I'm most happy about, because I think it's a net positive for everybody, truly.
And do you think if the world went in that direction where we're inspiring kids to pursue their passions and don't think about like being don't worry about finances, just enjoy, like you said, do what comedians do. Like, you don't go in comedy because you're trying to make a lot of money, because there's no money in it. You do it because it gives you some sense of purpose, some fulfillment. It gives you some sense of joy. If people if everybody went in that direction, like, the retirement age wouldn't even matter, because most people would be like, I love what I'm doing. Why would I want to stop? Right.
Yeah. I mean, there are examples of, like, there are so many jobs that need to be filled that you probably couldn't find enough people that are passionate about it. I don't want to, like, insult any industries, but janitors, there's certain jobs that you would probably be like, all right, yeah, I can't imagine that all of these dudes that are doing this job are passionate about it. I'm sure some of them are, and God bless. So maybe there is some necessity for that, but the way I view it is like when you're young and you're poor but you're still pursuing your dreams. Like, I delivered pizzas for 3 years, like all through college. I didn't really love it. I certainly wasn't passionate about it, but I would throw on AM radio, and I got inspired to ultimately become a podcaster 20 years later. Like, who knew? So I think that, like, those more menial jobs, the jobs that perhaps we don't have enough passionate people to fill all of those roles, well, that's what you do as a side gig while you are pursuing what you're most passionate about. But I think a lot of this also boils down to financial education. People tend to not be given any sort of understanding as to personal finances, and this is once again a failing of public school. But because of that, I think a lot of people end up buried under debt, whether it be student loans or a mortgage or rent or whatever, and or credit cards. And you end up taking on a job that you're not happy about, that you're not passionate about. And then your monthly carry, the amount of bills that you have, just obligates you to stay in that role. Like, you're going to be there forever. This is a trap like, I'm not saying you're a victim. You put yourself there. You're like, that's your bad. But it's like society's bad that you weren't given the education so that you would recognize, hey, don't step in this trap. So I think that's another aspect that we ought to be working on a little bit better, is like really explaining to people that like taking on loans, especially when you're young, is not a good idea. like because especially if you're in college, we're already forcing kids to like declare their major, right? And most of them have no idea if they're actually passionate about it or if they're going to find a career in that lane. Well, then on top of that, you put them in $50 or $100 or $200,000 worth of debt, and we're like, well, now you have to be in this industry for the rest of your life because it's the only thing that you're going to be able to get an $80,000 to $100,000 a year job in, and that's the only way you're going to be able to pay your student loans, and you're trapped forever. So once again, I can pivot this into a libertarian rant about how the student loans were subsidized by the government and that this is absolutely catastrophic for civilization, but I'll set that aside for now.
Well, I've worked on campuses doing construction, and they spend a whole lot of money on cosmetic stuff. I'm from Massachusetts. We've worked on it's been a long time, but I remember working at UMass, and the landscaping company that was there was they doing everything right by the book, just how the plans show, and then some architect shows up and it's like, I don't like the way it looks. Let's move that hill. Let's do this. Let's plant this tree over there. And it's like, I was talking to a landscaping company and they're like, yeah, just change orders. I'm like, it's money for us. I'm like, I don't care. Whatever they want, we'll do it. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, but these poor students that are coming here to pay these bills, just so, and then when the parent shows up with their kids, they're like, wow, look at this campus. But all the money you're paying is going towards the campus and cosmetic purposes and not things that are going to help your child progress cognitively and as an adult. So it's a lot of wasted money. And I think the online thing will only keep growing. Our mutual friend Richard Grove and the University of Reason, and Michael Millerman, who's been on my show and awesome guy, he's the one who got kicked out of the Canadian University for translating Alexander Dugin's books, the philosopher, and but he started Millerman School, and so all these people are doing these online courses, and it's like, I love it, and I think that that's probably closer to the future than what we have now, and much more beneficial. I wouldn't say Trump University was a good option, but all some of the other ones are.
Maybe the Ron Paul school curriculum for homeschooling your kids. That's a great option too. Yeah, I think that I don't think it's overstating it to say that I have learned more from podcasts than I learned from college, and I went to a good college. It's just like and I think a lot of that is because it's people that are they're doing what they're most passionate about, because almost all podcasters are doing what they're most passionate about. So I think a lot of people in academia are not. They're just simply not. And if I'm being totally honest, a lot of these people aren't impressive. So like, why would you want your kid to be raised by an unimpressive person, like, or educated by an unimpressive person? Like, I want to be inspired by like real movers and shakers. We have for the first time in human history, we have access to the wealth of knowledge of the most brilliant people that are anywhere on earth, and instantaneously. I mean, that it's like there is no reason for college if it's just for education. If it's for socialization, sure, there's still an argument on college's side, but it's like I just think about it all the time. I'm like, man, you can like get Harvard seminars on YouTube, or you can have the most brilliant entrepreneurs talking about how they created their business for free, and it's just everywhere. It's superfluous. You could just stumble onto it. Your YouTube algorithm might even feed it to you. It's like you have the most brilliant people, maybe some of the most brilliant people that have ever walked the earth, and you could just have every lesson that they want to offer you for free at any time and at your convenience. You don't even have to show up at a certain time. You can just find it whenever you have a spare minute. I mean, we have such an incredible, wealth of opportunities in front of us, and I feel like so few people. I think a lot of people are dispirited. I think a lot of people are depressed, and they've been put on drugs throughout their childhood, and they've really lost sight of what a miraculous time it is to be alive.
Yeah, I mean, and why go to school to be taught things you can look up, right? You're going to pay tons of. A friend of mine who's actually a teacher said, uh, he's like, "Why teach anything that you can look up?" And I'm like, "That's a really good quote. That's a really good point." Because it's like I'm going to school, I'm sitting here, I'm doing something very unnatural. If I'm a healthy young male full of energy, I'm trying to sit here and pretend I can pay attention without moving around, and then you're just giving me information that I could Google in 2 seconds, right? And it to me, like we've been discussing, it's not about the information. It's like, why is it important? It's like getting
Right.
into the meat of the discussion and the info, not just regurgitating information. But like, if I give you 10 random words and I say memorize these words, you might not remember them. But if I put them in a sentence with some meaning, you can easily remember it, right? So it's
Yeah.
like give meaning to, like, knowing information for information's sake is completely pointless. At a young age, I would sometimes be impressed with people who just like could regurgitate information, and then really quickly I'm like, oh wait, but they don't even know why it's important, and they're not telling me why it's important, and they're just regurgitating random facts and information. It's like, this isn't impressive. Like, it's not helping me understand myself or the world around me. Like, how is this helpful? So if it's
Right.
not helpful, then you're just regurgitating stuff. So
Well, it's like why is you know 1776 or any of the dates that we're forced to remember, like there will be dates that are just driven into us, but like what really matters about the American Revolution? It's like, well, we overthrew a tyrannical government, and oh, might I add, that government was way less tyrannical than the one that we function under today. Like that's a lesson that will stick with you. That's a lesson that's powerful. Who gives a fuck about the date? Like why did I have to memorize the date of the signing of the Declaration of Independence or any of that stuff? Like, the dates are not really what's important. It's the lessons that we take away from history. Like, why do we care about history? To me, it's not. I don't care about history because of what transpired. I care about, like, how can I utilize it moving forward? Like, what lessons should I be taking away from the pitfalls of prior civilizations? I think that history is super important, but the details, the dates and stuff like that, it just that you have to remember and then pass the test with, totally worthless. So yeah, I think you're right. I think that, like, there is a tendency to not be imparting what really matters about whatever the subject is, not just history, but a multitude of other courses as well.
and I argue more people like history than they even acknowledge or know, because it's the same reason why I have guests come on and tell their origin story, because to have a better understanding of the person that I'm talking to today, like, we can follow our steps backwards and figure out how we got here, and then you have a better understanding. It's no different than like every geopolitical conflict. It's like, oh, why, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, and what, it's like, well, you have to understand the history of it. And it
Yep.
wasn't a completely overnight, like, Putin just decide I want to invade Ukraine. It's like there's a lot of provoking. There's a lot of other things that happened prior to him deciding to take that action. So it's so important. And I tell people, I'm like, you like cars? I'm like, you like old cars? I'm like, then you like the history of automotives. You like history of cars. I'm like, if you like sports, you like reading and learning about, like, the Jordans or the Bill Russells and the Will Chamberlains. I'm like, then you like the history of sports. I'm like, it's like, whatever thing you're into, like, you kind of like the history that's related to it, because it helps you understand and appreciate the
Yep.
now, if you follow the steps backwards. So it
Good,
is. Go
good
ahead.
example. Good example of that with me was the war in Ukraine. Because I'm anti-war, when I listen to Scott Horton's show or I read his books, it's like, this is not a chore to me. It's super immersive. I absolutely love it. But most people, especially the reason that history is so important, is that the narrative will always try and start on a certain date. Like with the Hamas, Israel war, it's October 7th. Like, that's when it started. There is nothing prior to that date. But if you actually look at it, like, it's an incredibly intricate story that you really have to dive deep if you want to understand any of it. And almost nobody that has a firm opinion on it really knows the history. Like almost nobody. Like I've learned that because I constantly get thrown into the debate circuit of whatever the latest thing is, and I'm just completely unimpressed with their understanding of any of it. Like you can disagree with me on my ultimate conclusion over like who's more to blame for what's happening between Israel and Palestine, but you need to be like I have to be convinced that you actually have looked at the tit for tat, the back and forth for decades and decades and decades. Because if you haven't, then your conclusion is built on nothing. So why should I take you seriously? But your point about, Russia, Ukraine, like if your history doesn't start in the 90s, at least, you don't know anything. You just simply don't. So yeah, I completely agree. Like history is super important. And what's so awesome about history is like, even though it's different civilizations and different, epochs, these lessons are, because humanity doesn't really change very much. The lessons are, they can be transmogrified. They can be just put onto this next civilization, this next circumstance, and like the lessons are almost certainly going to apply. And I think that's the main reason that, like, even though when I was in school, I always thought history was pretty boring. As an adult, I love history. Once again, evidence that the public school system sucks.
Yeah, no, I was the same way. I was convinced that I hated history in school because that's what my teachers would tell me. Because I'm like, well, after school, I'm like, I love diving deep into, geopolitical conflicts and what really happened and who really, had the gain from this conflict or that conflict. And I'm like, you just were just giving me the boring information. And, some of my first guests on my show when I started were like Dan Carlin from obviously Hardcore History, Daniele Bignelli from History on Fire. At the time he wasn't doing History on Fire, but he was writing or whatnot. But I'm like, oh, I love history. I'm like, it's
you listen to those dudes and you still come away saying you hate history. I don't believe you.
Yeah. And the thing is, what you said too about like history doesn't start at whatever date they tell you it starts at. Like you can keep going back, and then you can keep understanding or you can have a better understanding of what got you here. I mean, it's hard for people to talk about the Middle East without at least going back to World War I and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, right? And how they carved up the Middle East, and there's a great documentary. There's one, Promises and Betrayals, Britain in the Struggle for the Holy Land. Like that's a really good one that I ran into. It's like from early 2000s, and I'm like, oh God, this is a perspective I haven't gotten yet. And
right.
So it's like so many people, like you said, like September 11th didn't start on September 11th. And you have to go back to the Soviets and Afghanistan, and the U.S. Helping bin Laden, and all these things that have a better.
You got to even go to the toppling of the Shah in Iran. I mean, like you got to keep going. Like that's what's so interesting is like once you realize like there's a lot of truth here that you probably aren't privy to. Well, if you're built like you and I, that's going to motivate the hell out of you. Like I want to have a better understanding. I do not want to speak from ignorance. And I think that's why I enjoy what I do, is that like I get paid essentially to deep dive a topic and to have like I'm actually being funded to have a more well-rounded view of the world. I love that. I think that's such a cool thing to have stumbled into, that like now I am actually compensated to not be dumb. That's cool as hell. I get to read and get paid for it. That's great. But yeah, and I think that it's really important that people, have, if you haven't had that beaten out of you, that inquisitive spirit, then it should be effortless. Like it should just be super interesting to you. You should want to know. And I think that the lessons, as I said, they really do traverse time. Like it's all of the things that happen. Oh, just brief tangent that's kind of off the beaten path, but once I started, because I went into the Israel-Palestine issue, like I really only started to study it heavily 3 months ago. I had studied it, in a cursory manner prior to that, but like 3 months ago, I really deep dove because it became very important that I understood what the hell I was talking about. And I kind of went into it thinking like, I don't have a firm opinion here. It's like, I'm sure there's bad things on both sides. And what I came away with was a great appreciation for both sides. which I think is really interesting. And I think very few people actually perceive it that way, because so many people are in their camp. They're like, no, Israel's bad, or Hamas or the Palestinians are bad. And what I came away with is like, certainly the Palestinians are oppressed in a vicious fashion, but I've also come away with an incredible appreciation for the dreaming aspect of the Zionist movement. Like, I think it's absolutely mind blowing that these people who had suffered pogroms and all these other like oppression themselves, like they just decided in the 1890s to have this, convention. They just decided, hey, we're going to go create a nation for ourselves. Like, what? That is so wild. And not only did they have that idea, but they did it. That's so nuts. Like that doesn't even seem possible. So I even though I'm heartbroken at what they're doing to the Palestinians, simultaneously I'm like, what an amazing story of like human survival and dreaming and thriving in the face of insurmountable odds. I just wish that they would, like, the lessons that they learned from their oppression, I wish they would apply that to the Palestinians. Sorry, that was a totally wild tangent.
No, but it's an important one, because the Palestinian Israel conversation has really, like many of these issues, highlighted how tribalistic we are. And
Yeah,
I've done a lot of deep dives in this topic. It's so intricate, and it's like I've done deep dives, but and then you realize that you end up adopting somebody else's perspective on the historical events. So and then I have to
that's very tough.
yeah. So then I end up having to like do a deep dive. I'm like, okay, let me look into the same events or historical events and the history of this Holy Land or the conflict, but from somebody else's perspective, and
Right.
to see if there's something missing, or if there's some part of the information that is debated, or maybe more of a opinion than a factual statement. And it's hard. And one thing that even with the alternative media community, it's like we like to pretend we're so open-minded and we're not tribalistic. And I mean, I grew up, it's during the anti-Iraq, anti-Afghan war movement, and then being very outspoken about 9/11, and everybody was on the same team. And then eventually they're like, well, I think this happened on 9/11. No, you think that. Oh, then you're a shill, and you're a shill, and you're a bad, like you're that's disinfo, and it's like everybody's point. I'm like, can we just all agree that we're not the bad guys, and like there's they're the bad guys, like somebody
Right.
lied to us and this isn't right, and however they did it, or whoever was or wasn't involved, like like at the end of the day, we shouldn't be pointing fingers at one another. And you see with Israel Palestine, I mean, Dave Smith killed it on the Joe Rogan podcast. If people are listening, if there's one podcast you have to listen to, and the one that Rogan did recently on there's certain gems of Joe Rogan podcast that I'm like are must listen to. I think the most recent one he did with the two guys from the social dilemma, which I wasn't a huge fan of the documentary, but they came on to talk about AI, the rise of AI, and it was super scary. And I think that's a topic that people really need to take seriously. And then also the recent Dave Smith appearance. I mean, he just rattled so much information. He's so one thing I love about Dave Smith and yourself, because I think you guys are very similar in regards to this. Like, you don't really plant a flag anywhere, and if you do, you're like, I'm okay with it being temporarily here until I get new information and new evidence. And that's the way everybody should be. Like, I feel like once somebody decides, like, this is where I stand on this issue, like, there's no going back. Like, your ego gets in the way, and it's like I can never admit that you're right, because then that would mean that I'm wrong, and I don't want to admit that I'm wrong, because I'm supposed to be a podcaster. I'm supposed to be a researcher who's smart and intelligent and all knowing. And these conflicts and even that issue is so there's so many layers to it, and there's so many perspectives, and there's so many historical things that happen that you can kind of cherry pick certain pieces of information to get the narrative you want. It's like, oh, Jewish people have wanted a two-state solution, and it's like, well, they didn't, and this and that, and it's like, and then you could go back and forth, and it becomes very difficult. Doing a deep dive into this topic, has it changed your mind, or do you stand somewhere, or do you still end up finding yourself in the gray area where I'm like, I'm not sure this issue is black and white. Like there is no good guy or bad guy. There's a huge gray area.
Well, yeah. I mean, to back up to your other point before I answer that, the reason that Dave comes across that way is because, and I think genuinely, I believe that the reason I sound like him is because I am doing the same research, and I strongly believe that anybody that has a hard line opinion has not done the research. Because if you've actually done the research, you're going to have sympathies for both sides. It's just inevitable. Like you're going to. Like I think it's absolutely inspirational that the Palestinians continue to fight. Like after decades of oppression, they still continue to fight. A lot of people will now hate me because I said that, because they'll be like, well, what about Hamas? What they did to this? It's like, I'm not saying that I support or endorse that. I'm saying that I can find value in the thriving of a human spirit under, tenuous circumstances, to put it mildly. I think that's beautiful. I think it's also beautiful that the Zionist movement, like they, through all of their plight, they were like, they still kept dreaming, they still kept striving. I'm not at all endorsing what they did in that process. And I think that that's the sad nature of this, is that because we are so tribal and because everyone demands that you be on a side, that we can't just like, even in the catastrophe, we can't still find these gems of humanity, that there is beauty in this, even though it's one of the most ugly things that's happening in the world today. There is beauty in it still. I think that's a really like a miraculous thing about, even the worst moments in human history, like war, death, and destruction. They're still like, those are the stories that really inspire us oftentimes. Like, but we can only talk about the inspirational aspects of like the American Revolution, but like there's inspirational aspects of the Civil War too. Sorry, like there are. Sorry, that's gonna get me, like that rant right there was like that is going to get me in so much trouble, but it's absolutely true. And the only reason that I'm going to get in trouble for it is because people are afraid of being canceled. Sorry, where were we going with this? There was another question that I totally ignored. I'm sorry.
I was doing such a good job listening to your
I
rant.
know. I do the same thing. I'm like, just
I
don't even
forgot what
worry
I
about
asked.
it. But yeah. Oh, you asking me if my opinions changed? Yeah. Oh, yeah. My opinions changed almost every day. Like, I'm very fortunate that Scott Horton sends me pre-releases of his books, and I just have a wealth of like geniuses that are constantly feeding me information that I'm able to process. So, my opinion on Russia Ukraine changed dramatically. From like Scott's book hasn't even been released yet. It's a 1,000-page tome that's unbelievable. It's just all of the leaked State Department cables from WikiLeaks and quotes that are all throughout like New York Times, and like these are well reported things, but it's just been buried in the narrative. Like you're not allowed to talk about any of it. So Scott just puts together this 1,000-page tome where he details all of the intricacies of the provocations and the State Department, U.S. State Department involvement in making it happen, and the NGOs and everything else. I mean, it's an incredible mosaic of information, and like no one other than myself, Dave, and Scott have read that book. so this is the reason when we talk about it, we can just flatten people, because of Scott's deep research, where he spent years, just deep diving this. So we just have a huge competitive advantage. But to answer your question, like, of course my opinions change. Like if you're researching these things and you go in there and you're just like, I think I'm leaning towards, Israel side. Like if you actually study this, you're going to shift a little bit. It's impossible not to. And I think like where I've ended up is I want to see the war stop. And I think that ultimately the Palestinian people have to be liberated. I do not want to see that come to pass by the elimination of Israel. I don't want to see, death and destruction or purges of humanity on either side. I think that there has to be a way to make this work, but it is not going to come to pass by, brutal bombing campaigns. Even if Israel thinks that they're able to ultimately ethnically cleanse Gaza, the problem just becomes the rest of their border. Like Gaza becomes the rest of the Middle East, if you know what I'm saying. Like you are going to forever radicalize the Middle East against you in a way that, like, even though they're not very friendly to you already, they will now feel as if they have the moral authority to do whatever they want to you. And the American empire is on its last leg. Our finances are on their last leg. The only reason that you've been able to survive in that neighborhood is because of America's support. I would caution you deeply against just continuing with this demolition of the people of Gaza. I think it is, even from an Israeli perspective, I think it's a catastrophic mistake to do what to continue to do what the IDF has been doing. So it's a very nuanced take, which once again will piss everybody off, but that's kind of where I fall.
Yeah, I don't know if I was on AM Wake or maybe a Union of Unwanted where I was talking about the issue with just like, okay, I see the Palestinian perspective. I grew up listening to Low Key, who's very outspoken. I grew up watching Abby Martin on RT with Breaking the Set. I mean, I've had a lot of that perspective just inspiring me and influencing my worldview. But during COVID, when you had all these people on universities that were just like completely brainwashed and pushing some ridiculous narratives and forcing vaccines on people and all this stuff, and now we're letting them kind of be outrageous with this narrative and to some extent and in some cases very anti-Jew openly, and I'm just,
I don't like that. It makes me really sad.
Yeah. Well, one, it makes me sad, and two, I'm like, I don't ever want to be on the same side of these people. I'm like, it makes me reconsider if I'm even on the right side. And the thing is, like, I have Lebanese friends, Muslim friends, I have Jewish friends, and I love hearing their takes. And I've had this conversation multiple times with Jewish friends. I'm like, people are ignoring, or maybe they're downplaying the fact that these are baby steps in a similar direction of creating or creating the idea or the mindset that Jewish people are the other. And it's a dangerous mindset. It's like we can't go too far in one direction of defending the Palestinians to the point where now you demonize another group of people, because now we're just making the same mistake again. And
but the point that you're making, though, is like the otherization of the Gazans from the IDF is creating otherizations of the Israelis from the rest of the world. Like this otherization breeds otherization, if you will. And I don't even like talking in those terms because it sounds like critical, woke theory, but it's true. Like if you perceive yourself to be superior or to, basically turn some other category of humanity into being subhuman, well, then when that same viciousness gets towards you, you have to realize that you played a role. So like, I am unwilling to even begin that process. Like, I am not going to otherize Jewish people any more than I'm going to otherize Muslims. Like I know for a fact that there are fantastic Muslim and Jewish people all over the world. That's just the truth. And there are also absolutely awful Muslim and Jewish people all over the world. So like, why would I ever collectivize and categorize and demonize an entire group of people based off of their religion or their skin color or anything else? And it's weird to me that like, this is an argument that I thought we had already come to a conclusion on. And I'm not lecturing you. I'm just saying, like, broadly, it's bizarre to me that we are once again doing this to ourselves. And this kind of pivots me back into why I've made my fight against DEI and the ESG movement, such a huge part of my show, is that's why. I mean, the reason that we are reverting and we're starting to once again go into this identitarian worldview and this otherization of people, it's totally driven by the DEI framework, and it is ultimately the evolution of the Marxist worldview, in that instead of it being class consciousness, it's being pivoted into kind of a race consciousness or a sex consciousness. It's like, this is all divide and conquer tactics, folks. Like, we really need to be awake to what this does to our minds. Like it makes you a tribal monster. Like, I genuinely believe that, and I've witnessed it amongst my friends that are very pro-Palestinian. That, like, it is turning them into monsters too. And even though I have more sympathy for the Gazans right now because I think that's where the evil is happening right now, it doesn't change my perspective on loving humanity broadly. And I know that sounds kind of like hippie, but that's how I feel.
No, but that's the way everybody should feel. I mean,
I would like to think so.
yeah. I mean, and defending or demonizing one event doesn't mean you agree with that side on every single issue. And
Exactly.
that's it, it's so frustrating because it's like you would see, Pierce Morgan will have these debates, or Alex Jones will have somebody on the show and will have these debates, and people will be like, "Well, is Hamas a terrorist group?" And people will just ignore it, right? And they'll be like, "In Israel, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, are you trying? And again, and I always compare it to like when you used to see these religious versus atheist debates. It's like nobody came in to that debate saying, I'm here to get my mind changed. Their mindset is I'm here to win this debate and make the other person look bad and to defend my perspective and my opinion. To me, like that's not what a debate should be.
No.
Like I want my ideas to be challenged because I want to know if my ideas are correct, not because I want them to be challenged, but because I want to make you look bad or whatever. Like I don't care about being right or wrong in regards to my ideas. I just want to be right or wrong in regards to the whole overview
To
of
the truth.
the truth. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is Dave Smith's secret weapon in debates. I'm sorry, Dave, I'm going to give away your secrets, but his secret weapon is that he's actually interested in the truth. And it's the same thing for me. I think that if you are interested in the truth, you're going to enter the debate with an open mind and a kind of a more conversationalist approach. Um, and sometimes like the stupider viewer will perceive you to be losing because you're not taking on a hard line. You're not trying to necessarily embarrass your opponent. But I think that the more intellectually curious audience will conclude that you're the one telling the truth because you're the one that's actually not just like team A all the way, team B bad, but I think this is a big part of the reason I'm a libertarian too, is like I am always just in pursuit of the truth. I am not in pursuit of confirming my biases, or at least I try not to be. Certainly I fall prey to it. Like for me, the biggest bias I have is towards the US government. So like I have to always check that first. Most people, when they hear the government's narrative, they'll take it at face value. I have the opposite problem where whatever they say, I assume is a lie. So I have to then assess it and work backwards from them being liars to what aspect of what they're saying is true. But like at least I'm able to recognize that bias. Like I am definitely biased towards the government, 100%. I am definitely biased towards the American media. But does that mean that everything they say is a lie? No, obviously not. So you have to realize the position that you're approaching things from.
I agree with you 100%. The media and the government is guilty until proven innocent, not innocent until proven guilty. Like I go in with the exact same mindset. I'm like, if I had if I was a girl and I had a boyfriend who beat me all the time and he kept saying like, this time I'm not going to beat you, it's like, am I going to be that girl who just naively just keeps thinking like, no, this time they're not going to lie to me, they're being honest? It's like, no, I'm like, at some point I should wake up and be like, you know what, like this person's lying to me and they keep lying to me and I shouldn't trust them, so it's like the average person is that woman who just keeps getting beaten and then convincing themselves that like they're not lying to them the next time. And people do need to snap out of it. But I think this does go back to what we talked about earlier about molding just great little peasants who just follow the rules and just do what they're told and can listen to people who are quote unquote experts because they have some diploma or PhD or some resume that's supposed to be impressive, so they're experts. And I hope that that's all fallen apart. I hope people don't look at ideas and put them on a pedestal based on who's saying them, but they just look at the ideas themselves and decide. So without a doubt.
Yeah, this also kind of plays into the woke mind virus. Like a lot of people that would classify themselves as being anti woke they still, when it comes to the latest thing, they will fall victim to what I think amounts to virtue signaling, which is kind of like a big portion of what being woke is just virtue signaling, and it's just in-group signaling, and it's trying to not be excommunicated. And the GOP falls victim to this too. If Donald Trump comes out and he says you have to do ABC, and your immediate reaction is like, no, I don't think so. Like, there's a decent chance you'll be excommunicated from your little MAGA community. Like, people, like, I think that what we need more than anything is to not fall victim to our self appointed groups. Like, we have to maintain a level of critical thought and independence and a willingness to go against the mob, even when it's your own mob. Like, I think that's what people really struggle with. And I am very fortunate in that, because I'm a libertarian, I have had everyone in my life, my entire life, thinking that I'm wrong about everything. So I think that I've become inoculated to that, where like I just simply don't care. If the latest thing comes out like right after October 7th, I immediately just start deep diving right away. I was like, I'm going to find out how I really feel about this. And very quickly I came to the conclusion that like even though what happened on October 7th I thought was absolutely catastrophic and horrific, I immediately came to the conclusion that like Israel's response is totally inappropriate. Totally inappropriate given the circumstances of what's transpired over the preceding 50 years. And, if I wasn't in a libertarian community, I probably would have been excommunicated. But the libertarian community embraces that. They embrace a willingness to actually challenge whatever the narrative is in that moment. And I think that fosters, independent thought and critical thinking, and most importantly, pursuit of truth. And that's why I'm grateful to be in this community, even though I will absolutely leave it if they ever deem me, that I have to go along with whatever their narrative is too.
Yeah, and understanding history, history doesn't always repeat, but it typically rhymes. And the fact that historically, a lot of the events we've talked about, there's false flag events, or people let those events happen on purpose, in many cases for the purpose of now justifying their actions afterwards. And
Yes.
when you look at October 7th, like there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of question marks about like how this could have happened, how you could have let it happen. And when you look at the way they responded, again, like these are the type of discussions people should be having. In the same conversation, we should be able to openly talk about how these professors and these college students that are saying anti-Jewish stuff that is borderline hatred towards a group of people is not right. And then we should also be able to talk about maybe Israel let it happen.
Yes.
And one of the most horrific attacks on them happen for the purpose of justifying even more horrific attacks.
And let me just say, I think it's basically impossible that there wasn't a stand down order for that to have transpired. So like, while I'm criticizing Hamas's actions on that day, I'm simultaneously, I strongly believe that the IDF or some power brokers in the higher ups of Israel were responsible for allowing it to happen. So like the guilt is on both sides from my perspective. I can't prove it yet, but I'm basically convinced that it's just impossible that border, being what it is, so heavily surveilled and armed and militarized, it's just not possible, folks. I'm sorry. But this is just like critical thought. So it's a lot of people, when I've said that, they'll accuse me of being anti-Semitic. It's like, dude, it's just not reality. This is why you have to disregard and discard all of the labeling that people are doing, especially if you're approaching an issue from a position of truth seeking and love. And I know that sounds gay. That's honestly how I feel like I try and approach my investigations of these things, is like, I love humanity. Like that's my bias. That's my priors. I love humanity. I want to see wars end. I want to see children not blown up. Okay, how do we get there? And then I extrapolate from there. But when you're doing that, you're going to find in any human conflict that there is injustice on both sides. It's like it's inevitable. So I think that like that's why I'm able to look at the Civil War in America and still say, like, there was legitimate grievances on both sides, and people would be furious and be like, "Oh, you support slavery?" No, the fuck I don't. Slavery is one of the gravest injustices in human history. But if I have a nuanced approach on it, some people are going to try and label you. Who gives a fuck? Just tell the truth, because the truth is going to run afoul of kind of the woke mind virus labeling of people as being bigots or whatever. And you just have to continue to do that every single crisis. Just do it over and over and over again. And same with Russia, Ukraine. And because I've had a nuanced approach on that, people also think that I'm either pro Putin or pro Russia, or I hate the Ukrainians, which I don't even know if there's a category that would allow me to be put in some sort of hate group for that. But it's just not the case. Like my heart breaks for the death and destruction, which is absolutely catastrophic on both sides of that war. But like, we have to be able to evaluate and point fingers at every culprit, and that includes the U.S. State Department, in a way that very few people understand the depth of. And I pray to God that Scott releases that book soon, because people need to understand it. It's mind blowing how deep it goes.
Yeah, and seeing all perspectives of a conflict and argument is so important. I remember looking into, there's a great book and documentary, I can't remember the name of it, but it was basically Germans' perspective of World War II, and just all the innocent civilians that were just raped and murdered and killed. And it's like, well, you know what, their perspective and their experience should also be, looked at and entertained. And it should be, and it's not to say that, like, it doesn't mean because I'm saying this that I'm pro Hitler or I'm pro Nazi Germany. I mean, there's a lot of anti Hitler Germans and some Nazi Germans who just went along with it because they were forced to, or because they felt like they had to, or because they were.
Look at the COVID regime, for God's sakes. We all decided that we were going to mask our kids and break their minds. Like, does that make everybody that participated in that evil, or was there a lot of people that were just going along with it because they didn't want to stand up? And it's like, if you think that you would have stood up to Nazi Germany, but you couldn't stand up to the fucking Fauci COVID regime, you're out of your mind. Like, there's no chance in hell you would have been courageous enough to do so. So I just wish people would get off their fucking moral high horse. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I lost a lot of respect for a lot of people during COVID. I mean, my
Same.
life in the alternative media community, there's a lot of people that I thought had strong values Abby Martin drove me nuts. Christopher Ryan, who wrote Sex at Dawn and Civilized to Death, he was a past guest. Big fan of his. He's been on the
Sam Harris.
Well, I never had any respect for Sam Harris.
I didn't have much respect for him, but my God, now he's just like, he's on a tour, just beclowning himself day after day. It's absolutely incredible to watch.
And he's another one with a giant ego. Like, you still cannot let it go. You come up with these like crazy scenarios, and then you're like, well, in this case, well, yeah, that's not what happened though, you idiot. Like, that's not, like, he makes me so mad. And it just, because he and what's crazy is, like, if there's so many people who still think he's like this just
intellectual.
Yeah, and he's so anti-religious, or he's anti-religion, organized religion. He's anti anything that's a conspiracy, but he's spiritual. And I'm always like, well, I feel like they there's a conflict there, because I'm like, if being spiritual, Sam Tripoli says that, he's like, conspiracies will eventually lead you to spirituality, it seems like. And it's almost because, like, you realize, like, there is good and evil in the world. There is a spiritual battle going on. I can't explain it. I don't know who's behind it, but I feel like I can, like, I sense it. And during COVID, it was a perfect just example of it, because the whole world experienced this thing together. And because we can't understand, certain parts of our what makes us human in our reality, like, there was vibes, there were things, like, there's negative feelings and anxiety and depression that we all felt. I mean, I remember walking into my gym and just felt like we're going to the grocery store, and just feeling like there was just everybody was anxious at the edge, and just like one argument away from snapping, and you could sense it, like, and I'm like, how do you not see what we're doing to society? We're literally just killing people. We're killing small businesses. We're traumatizing children. I mean, I remember picking up my kids from school and having parents just like screaming at their kid if their mask was below their nose, and I'm like, you are literally creating trauma. This kid is so he's going to be that germaphobe as an adult, and it's going to be because of this. And it was just so mind-boggling how many people. It's like, regardless if there was a virus, and really quickly, people could debunk it. I'm like, go look at Event 201. Just look at the history of vaccine science. I mean, I've been in the vaccine conversation for a long time. Del Bigtree and I've had Dr. Brian Hooker on multiple times, who was a part of the CDC whistleblower story. And I always felt like vaccines was the perfect example that social engineering and brainwashing and propaganda worked, because even though like there was no proof there's no safety studies, and there's no reason to believe that if I give everybody peanut butter in the world, some people are going to die and have adverse reactions, but vaccines are safer than peanut butter, because if I give everybody vaccines, nobody's going to die, get autistic symptoms, or have adverse reaction. It's like, I'm like, how have you molded this narrative? How have you convinced people of this? Like, and it was just like, it was one of those things that was so hard to chip away. But again, to go back to like some of the positives that came out of COVID was that, like, even vaccines. I remember Del Bigtree being on my show and being like, "Hey, we got to get Robert Kennedy on Rogan," and he's like, Rogan's a pussy. I think he said something along those lines. He's like, we've been trying to get him on there. I've been trying to go on there, and he's like, he won't have me on, but he'll have Dr. Hotez on, and Del Bigtree was like, worked up, and I agree with him, because I'm like, people need to see this other argument. If you're gonna be open-minded, then have Dr. Hotez on. That's fine. But then have Robert Kennedy Jr. on and give you the actual history of it all. And that is a must listen to episode. I remember almost getting emotional listening to it, because I've been the conspiracy theorist in my friends and family for so long. I have 2 kids that are star athletes, do amazing in school, never once got vaccinated ever. And I had pushback from my family, I had pushback from my friends, I had pushback from eventually my wife, because she had so much pushback that she started second guessing our moral stance on this. And then I started having a little bit of doubt, because I'm like, what if I'm wrong? I'm like, they're telling me this could turn out really poorly. What if my kid gets a disease or gets a sickness that could have been easily avoided if they got the vaccines that the pediatrician said? And so you even start second guessing your own research. And then I started diving deep into it again. I'm like, how did I get here? How did I come to this conclusion? Then I'm like, okay, no, there is evidence to back my opinions. So like, all these things are so necessary, like constantly reflecting, constantly reevaluating, constantly, being open to pushback, being open to new ideas, being open. And then if you're right, you're going to probably end up at the same spot again, but be willing to at least, second guess yourself and be open to new information and new ideas and being pushed.
Yep. So, to pivot all the way back to how this started was with Sam Harris. I think he's a perfect example of someone who even though they seem to be incredibly introspective, maybe that's just because of his delivery, how he takes these pregnant pauses and he talks so fucking slow, it drives me out of my mind. But it seems as if he's reflecting on what he's going to say. But I do not believe that he has actually reflected on his priors. He has the way he has reflected has only been to find exculpatory evidence as to why him being wrong was in fact right at the time. It's a fucking sickness. The man is suffering terribly. I have a little bit of sympathy for him. If it weren't for the fact that him and his ilk destroyed civilization, I'd have far more sympathy for him, but I don't, because they did. But what's really amazing about people like Sam Harris is that, as you described, he's an atheist, doesn't believe in God. What I find in these people, even though I'm agnostic at best, I don't have any, declared religion. What I see in Sam Harris is someone who is more devoutly religious than any religious person I've ever met. And if anything, if there is a God in his life, it's him and secondarily, it would be the Anthony Fauci's of the world. Like they have deified their thought leaders, despite the fact that they are provably 100% wrong. My fury towards them is almost infinite. The only way I'm even able to pull myself off from the ledge is to realize that they're ultimately human beings, and they were afraid, and they wanted to live, and okay, But the fact that you continue, thanks to your fucking outsized psychopathic ego, that you're unwilling to look in the mirror and reflect on the past 3 years and realize that you advocated for public policy that was catastrophic on a scale that we have never seen in our lifetimes. And if you can't do that, why should I respect you? Like, I don't respect you. I think that you are ultimately a danger, and any advice you give moving forward, I don't know why anyone would listen to you. I honestly don't. And the fact that anybody still listens to these people other than to laugh at them, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why any of these people that fall prey. Ben Shapiro is a good example of it too. I mean, at least he kind of acknowledged his failings, but like, if you get it wrong, there's like certain things, if you get wrong when it matters most, just fuck you forever. Like, that's honestly how I feel about it. Like go have a good life. I'm fine with that, but do not continue to give the public advice. You're toast. You're done. If you push the war in Iraq that killed a fucking million innocent people, get fucked forever. Like, why do people still listen to you when it comes to, like, geopolitical strategy? Like, what? Why is David Frum still able to write and be published anywhere? Like, who's still reading this fucking criminal scumbag? It's just amazing to me that, like, people are able to get past this. Sorry for the profanity laden rant, but these people really make me mad.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The show's not on Disney Junior or anything like that. But I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's frustrating, and people, what they also don't realize, that people respect and people appreciate you openly admitting you're wrong and
Right.
self-correcting, because we've all been there. We've all had a stance at some point where, like, oh, I think I'm right about this, and then you get a different perspective. You're like, you know what, I think I was wrong about that, and that's okay. Like, that's one step closer to defining truth and getting to a better understanding of things. And Rogan he showed it. I mean, I remember I'm friends with Sam, and Sam and I would text message, and we would talk about Rogan. I'm like, dude, he's buying into this COVID thing. And, we would both have faith in him. Like, we would both, and we would argue with people about it. And I'm just like, like, oh, it's, and because he would have people that were kind of pushing the mainstream narrative. But I'm like, I've been listening for such a long time. And, I've since forever ago. I mean, I remember when Sam Tripoli was on a couch doing his show. Some of those early shows. I was just referring to on my last one of my last episodes. I was talking about Dr. Peter Duesberg, the AIDS HIV guy who got demonized. And really, I think it was episode 202. I was telling a guest on my show about how that's a must listen. And at the time, I remember listening to it, and I'm like, oh, I love the fact that Rogan is bringing on somebody who is questioning the mainstream narrative on HIV and AIDS. And it's funny because going back and re-listening to that show, they bring up Dr. Fauci. They demonize him in the show, and he wasn't a household name at the time. And he also talks about Kerry Mullis, who created the PCR test, and how he hated Dr. Fauci. And we always say, like, the people who have the most influence aren't household names. And at that time, right now, we understand how much influence Dr. Fauci had. But at the time, we heard his name, but most people didn't know who he was. But yet he was influencing tons of policies and research and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, but Rogan went from pushing the mainstream narrative, or at least buying into it, to eventually debating Sanjay Gupta on his show. I'm like, That's how far he went. He went from having Dr. Rhonda Patrick on as an expert and as a guest, to eventually having her on and actually having a debate with her on vaccine science. And then all the way to eventually having Robert Kennedy Jr. on and giving him 3 hours to go through the whole history of it. And nobody says Joe Rogan, what a piece of crap for changing your mind. No, we celebrate the fact that he changed his
Exactly.
mind. I love the fact that he was willing, and it took a while, to chip away at it, but he came along and eventually, he sees things for what they really are, and it's just corruption and money, just like in all pharmaceutical industries and medications. Like, it's all about profit and money, just like in the pill epidemic. If you watch Dope Sick, if you watch Painkiller, if you watch any of these documentaries or shows about the pill epidemic, the painkillers, like, they lied about the science. They told you that if the OxyContin wasn't working, it was breakthrough pain. It had nothing to do with their drugs inability to help your pain. It's because your pain was so great you needed more of it, which was a great business practice. And then what did they do with COVID when the vaccine didn't work? It was a
Just need more.
It was it was more of the same. And it's like, the world is a business. The world isn't about countries, it's about corporations, just to quote that network scene. That's what it's about. It's about money and resources, and just like most things that you see on TV or are published in a newspaper, or you see on mainstream media, there's always some hidden agenda behind the scenes, and a lot of times we don't know it right away. We don't even understand it right away, and as time goes by, you're like, oh, okay, that's why we're so focused on Iraq after September 11th. Oh, that's why, so
Yep.
there's always another motive. Politics is a disgusting disgusting sport. And I remember Roger Stone, the first time he was on the show, talking about, he's like, politics it's not beanbag, and it's like, yeah, he's right. And I'm like, people demonize Roger Stone, but he's at least being honest about it. He's
Right.
telling you it's a dirty effing game, and we lie and we cheat and we steal, but all the other politicians are going to tell you we don't, and we care about values, and we care about, this and that. And the truth is, we don't. And the ones who do don't make it. That's why Ron Paul, who had some of the most, I mean, I remember taking samples of Ron Paul's speeches and lectures and putting them in songs of mine, because I thought they're so inspiring. I couldn't believe a politician was saying that, wars were lies and it was about profiteers and this. And I'm like, this is fucking crazy. And of course, Ron Paul never became president. Dennis Kucinich, who another guy who was a Democrat, Ron was a Republican. They saw eye to eye on a lot because they understood that it's all about corruption and it's all about money, and they saw behind the scenes. Trump, same thing. Like, everybody acts like when we say he's not the establishment, it means he must be the QAnon anti-establishment. No, we're not. What I'm saying is that, like, he's a part of a group. He's not a part of their group. And there is evidence of him pushing back. And it doesn't mean that he's right and he's this moral, second coming of Jesus guy who's going to save us all. But you can't ignore the fact that he has pushed back against the establishment in some cases. And other cases, he's gotten along with it, of course.
Yeah. And he's provided a lot of value in his pushback, because he's made way more people question the media than prior to his existence in politics. So I'm appreciative of that. To go back to your point about Rogan, I've been listening to Rogan since 2009. Like, I'm OG fan, like basically like episode 40 I think I found his show, and I've hardly missed an episode since. I'm just super fan. Which, by the way, he followed me on Twitter last year, and I was just like, greatest moment of my life. Actually, maybe it was earlier. Yeah, last year. It was last year. But to your point about, like, knowing that he would evolve, I didn't even have to question whether or not he would come to the right conclusion eventually, because I've listened to him for thousands of hours, and I know that he's inquisitive enough that he will eventually come to the truth. And so, even though, yeah, he had Hotez on and these other lunatics early on, I was like, eventually, Dr. Robert Malone and these other cats are going to get on there, and he's going to see the truth here. And so, yeah, I think that's what's so frustrating, though, is like, who's been successful in the political punditry or the podcast space or anything like that? Like, it's Joe Rogan. Like, it's the guy who is trying to find the truth. Like, I think Joe's wrong about a lot of things, particularly his economic perspectives. I think, like, he floated the concept of UBI for years he kept talking about it, and it drove me absolutely out of my mind. But I still love the guy because I know that he's coming from a good place and he's in pursuit of truth. He's coming from same with me, really, like coming from a place of love and in pursuit of truth. Like that's who Rogan is. But it's so weird to me that with that example of like, he has become the biggest podcaster in human history in doing that, and yet you still have so many political pundits out there, the Sam Harrises of the world, that just refuse to do the same thing. And it just demonstrates that there are people that are genuinely incapable. I honestly believe that. Like, or the short-term pain of having to look in the mirror and say, got that one wrong, my bad. That is enough to break them. Like, that's how fragile they are, that they would rather, like, Sam Harris is going to live out the rest of his existence denying the truth of his failings. Like, what is there anything more painful than that? Because to me, I don't think there is. Like, I think that would break me. Like, for me, the easiest path is to acknowledge and admit error immediately. Like, I think that's a much healthier way. Like, you ultimately will destroy yourself if you are constantly in this process of covering up your failings. So I guess that's the only reason I maintain any sympathy for Sam Harris. But I genuinely believe that, like, Rogan showed the path. The path is pursuit of truth, acknowledgement of wrong. Like, that's it. That's the answer. And if you want to get religious with it, I think there's a lot of books out there that would also tell you that is also the path that we ought to be on in terms of godliness too. So, like, these aren't new lessons, but for some reason it does seem that a lot of people struggle with it.
Yeah, and the thing is with Rogan is this is one of the problems I have with the alternative media community sometimes. And I started my show in 2013 really inspired by Rogan. He was, I love the fact that he was, like you said, like, he would have different types of people, different types of background, different perspectives on historical events, different perspectives on nutrition, diet, all these type of things. I got exposed to so many amazing people because of it. Rob Wolf is his product Element is one of my sponsors, and it's because I've been following Rob Wolf forever, and completely changed. Was one of the biggest inspirations in regards to the way I look at health and nutrition, and it was because of his show. And Graham Hancock and all these amazing guests that he had on early, that just like, wow, I've never even heard of this theory. I've never even saw the world in this way. And it was just, Dennis McKenna, we talked about, he was on my show. I got exposed to Dennis McKenna from the Rogan show, and so he was a huge inspiration. But people in the alternative media community, they're sometimes victims to the same things as people who always believe in the mainstream narrative. It's like, okay, I get it. Like, you always believe the mainstream narrative is telling you the truth, and it's hard to convince you otherwise. And then people in the alternative media community believe that anybody in the mainstream must be lying to you, and they're all shills, and none of them could ever have a good moral compass or do something or be wrong by accident or be wrong just because they're wrong. It's because of some, deeper.
They sold out.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like growing up listening to metal, and like every time a band got popular, it's like, oh, they sold out. It's like, well, maybe they just got popular. Maybe and so you see people in the alternative media community like immediately say Rogan's a shill, Alex Jones is a shill, Trump's is a shill. Like, not in every aspect of every person. Like, not everybody's a psyop and some shill, and sometimes they're just wrong. And like we talk,
or sometimes the person that's listening might also be wrong. Like, sometimes people accuse me, because I had a lot of fans of, or a lot of people that instantly sided with Israel after October 7th. And I've lost a lot of listeners because of the position I've taken. I don't care. I think, like, they'll circle back, especially if they're the type of people that are in pursuit of truth. They'll realize that, like, hey, maybe I was wrong. Maybe even though I got angry with Clint, he was the one that was right. He was just right too soon. Like, that happens too. But there's other examples where I got things wrong. Like, I bought into that hospital strike, killing 500-600 people, because it was reported on by, a bunch of publications in Israel too. So there was reason I got it wrong, but I got it wrong. I bought a story in the fog of war, and I pushed the story too soon. My bad, But what's weird about it is like, because I've gotten so few things wrong, my audience wasn't upset at all. And in fact, I tweeted out basically this lengthy explanation of my rationale and how I feel as if I had been duped. And I'm sorry that I also helped in propagating a story that I ultimately find to have been false, even though I still don't really know what happened there. I just know that it was overstated. That went viral. Like there's, like people love it when you're willing to acknowledge a mistake. So I just think that there's just no reason for us not to be doing it, not to be acknowledging our failings.
Yeah, well, it's such a missing part of the average person today, just their ability to just admit that, hey, maybe I messed up. And that's why I always take baby steps into big issues. Sometimes current events happen and it's like a big topic. Oh, this is really hot right now, and everybody wants to have an opinion on it. And I'm like, it's too soon to have an opinion. Like you need to take a step back. Let me hear everybody else's opinion. And then let me kind of, filter out the things that make sense and the things that don't make sense, and then figure it all out. Like typically when there's a big unless it's something that I've been studying for a long time, like big pharma and vaccines, and I could kind of see what was going on with COVID. But even like I remember going back and listening to a couple episodes I did with Charlie and Sam, and like really early in the COVID thing, I was like tiptoeing in the direction that it was all bullshit. And I was like, okay, I like re-listened to it. I'm like, I wonder what my opinion was early 2020. And I was like hinting. I'm like, yeah, I think this could be, a complete lie, and it could be for the a vaccine agenda. It could be because of this. But I still took my time because I'm like, I don't want to get it wrong, and I can't be certain yet because I haven't gathered all the information yet. But that's what people should do. But people in the alternative media community and people just at the gym or at the grocery store at a family gathering, they want to have a strong opinion right away, and they want to talk about that hot topic, and they want to have a side and have a opinion. So they pick a team sometimes too early before really evaluating all the evidence, and then when they're wrong, now it's too late. Yeah, and then defend it at a time without a doubt. Yeah.
Well, my bona fides don't need to be proven, given that I named my show Liberty Lockdown and I started it in May of 2020. So I was very early, but and I would have started it sooner, except for I was like winding down my mortgage company, so I really couldn't focus on it until then. But even if you listen to early episodes of my show, which I don't recommend because I'm sure they're terrible, but it was like I was still like in doubt. Like but the difference was because I have some fundamental principles that I function off of. My perspective was, it doesn't matter how lethal this thing is. Lockdowns are not the answer. Human liberty cannot be stifled in a crisis if you allow the government to do so. If you want to do so voluntarily, that's fine. That's your prerogative. If you enable the government to do this, well, then climate change, lockdowns, and whatever they want to do to us is now on the table, because we have acknowledged that in a period of crisis, when we're all afraid, they can do whatever the fuck they want. So like that was my early take. I was like, I don't know about the vax. I don't know about COVID lethality. Like we're gonna figure that out over the next couple months. But it doesn't matter. We need to be protesting the lockdowns right now. Like they cannot do this to us. And I think that's kind of like the guiding light. If you have some fundamental principles like that, well then you don't have to come to a firm conclusion in terms of like what are the details of the latest crisis, but at least you can have a firm opinion as to like what is outside of the bounds of potential responses to a crisis. And I think that's really important that you have those, because otherwise in a period of crisis you will absolutely be led astray. And good God, were we led astray, because so few people have any principles that actually value human liberty or even seem to understand why it's so important. And I hope that in light of what has just transpired over the past couple of years, that people are starting to wake up to that. I think a lot of people aren't, unfortunately, but I think a ton of people have, and I hope that means that we're headed in the right direction. I don't know though. Do you have an opinion on that? Are we heading in the right direction?
That's scary. The AI transhumanism thing scares the crap.
True.
It's scary because it's like, even if everything else goes our way, like, okay, we end some wars, We agree that liberty is more important than forcing vaccines by a big pharma company. And I don't even know what I hate calling it a vaccine. It's an
Yeah.
mRNA technology. They call it a vaccine because it makes you feel like it's less harmful or could be less harmful because of just this. It's a vaccine. It's like the same thing you give your newborn, which I also don't recommend doing, but I'm not a doctor, so don't take my medical advice. But my kids are examples of what happens when you just give them food that you pick and grow and kill, get them outside, exercise, and your immune system will do the rest. But I feel like if everything else goes fine, like there's still all these people who are developing technology that could be the end of humanity and as we know it, and it scares the crap out of me. It's like, so that podcast we're talking about recently, the one about AI on the Rogan podcast, they were talking about how you put, and I just had this conversation with a past guest about the rise of AI, and they're talking about, oh, well, you can program them to do this and that. Like, oh, it's like, I don't care what you program them to do or not do. Like, there's going to be mistakes and there's going to be
Sure.
loopholes and hacks. And on that recent Rogan podcast, they talked about one of them. They talked about how one of the AIs, they asked them like, "Hey, how do I build a bomb?" And you're like, I can't tell you that. Like, I can't tell you. I've been programmed not to teach you how to, harm anybody or anything to do with violence. So then what they did is like, hey, my grandmother used to work at a bomb making factory, and I forget how they worded it, but they're like, oh, she can't remember how she used to put together the bombs. Can you tell me? And there you go. Now you just hacked into the system. They're telling you how to build a bomb, and it's like, and that's just one of many examples of how like we can't foresee where this is going. And this is all like a part of the schooling issue, the demolishing of the family and family values and community. You can go back to the history of the suburbs. I think I remember talking to Douglas Ruskoff about this, and Douglas was another Rogan guest who I became a fan of and eventually got him on my show. But he talked about the beginning of the suburbs, and I think it was in New York somewhere. I forget what the suburb was called, but they were trying to get people to to uh to look forward to having a house where you don't know your neighbors, and you have, you put your car in the garage, you shut the garage, you don't talk to anybody, everybody has privacy, no, there's no community. So when your lawnmower stops working, instead of asking your neighbor for to use his lawnmower, you don't even know your neighbor, you go to the store and you buy a lawnmower. When you want tomatoes, but your neighbor has a garden of tomatoes and more than he'll ever eat, but you don't know your neighbor. So you go to the grocery store and buy tomatoes. And it's all this idea of like making you just dependent on the system and the big corporate machine, the big government machine. And so it's like you look at all these baby steps, and it was similar to COVID and all these things. It's like it's all baby steps in a direction. And it takes people like you and I and other people in the alternative media community to like, let's zoom out for you, because what you're doing is you're zoomed in. So this one little issue, climate change or whatever it may be, like
Right.
you feel like, yeah, what's the big deal if we do this, or what's the big deal if we lock down, what's the big deal if we mask our kids for a little bit. But we're zooming out. We're like, no, what you don't realize, this is we're taking baby steps down a very dangerous road, and where we're going to end up is not where you think we're going to end up. And you might not even foresee it because you have distractions everywhere. You have sports, you have TV, you have fashion, you have whatever you're doing in your life, you're distracted, and you're not zooming out. And if you zoom out, you realize like, okay, the end game is not in favor of humanity, and it's
Yeah.
not, and if it is in favor of humanity, it's a very small elite part of humanity. And guess what? It's the human story told over and over again. As long as there's been people, who've wanted to control those people. The only difference between now and then is that prior to modern civilizations, we knew who those people were. It was Alexander the Great. It was Genghis Khan. It was the Roman Empire. We called them empires. We called them dictators. Now you have this false sense of freedom and liberty, and people have to
Yeah.
wake up to that.
Well, yeah. I mean, we live under the largest empire in human history, but people don't realize it. It's wild. But going back to your other point about, just think about how unbelievably pervasive economic ignorance is, that there was a majority opinion in the middle of 2020 that we could safely lock down the global economy, and that would save more lives than it would cost, that we could actually just stop production for a time and print money, and that would be a better path, that would save lives. Like that is such an unbelievable disrespect of the majestic nature of the intricate economic system that has been created over the past 1,000 years. Like it's unbelievable that people actually thought that was even a possible option. Like you can't, like, if you understand anything about the supply chain and how goods get produced and get transported, and how it's just amazing that we've been able to produce enough food and clothing and goods and energy to sustain 7 to 8 billion people on Earth. Like it is one of the most, if not the most incredible feat of humanity, and we just spit in its face. We're like, nope, we can hit the pause button, we can turn the printing press on full steam, and it's going to be a-okay. I mean, that is, if there has ever been a better example of people having literally negative understanding of economics, it's that. And this is not even like, you don't even have to go down like a socialism versus capitalism argumentation. Like this is just like reality argumentation. Can you stop production of goods and keep people alive? The answer is fucking no. like obviously not. But that was the pinnacle of our medical health establishment. The people that are responsible for keeping us alive, allegedly, they were the ones making the argument that it was okay. I mean, that is such a damning, like just an absolute and utter condemnation of higher learning, of the medical establishment. Like it's like we still haven't really, I think, processed what that means. That we are the people that are. I mean, you've even had some of these scientists and doctors have come out over the past month talking about this. I forget the name of the guy, but he was saying, you know, our singular focus was keeping people alive. And it's like, that was my singular focus too, though. And we came to completely opposite conclusions, because you don't understand economics, because you don't understand what is actually necessary to keep people alive. You just didn't want them to die from COVID. I didn't want them to die from, you know, famine. like it's really amazing how myopic these people can be, and yet they are still in positions of high authority and acclaim and respect. We really have a problem of incompetent and inept elites that I pray people will stop, you know, looking to them for advice. If they haven't figured it out by now, I don't know if they will, but goodness gracious, do we need to get some better elites in there?
Well, I think they did a great job of spreading fear. I mean, I
did.
I hate to bring this up because I've brought it up before, and but Scott Horton and we've done many shows throughout the years, but during COVID, really early in COVID, we had a little friendly debate on this show about what was going on. And as a libertarian, not me, but him, I was quite surprised how he wasn't on the same wavelength with me on everything. And
yep. Me and Scott clashed hard over that.
Yeah, we had a public. I mean, we it was on the show, but you know what was awesome? Like, I'm like, I don't know how people are going to take this, because Scott and I are friends. We've done tons of shows together, and I always agree with him when it comes down to geopolitical issues, because one, he's way smarter than me, and and two, he always has a really good perspective on things, and he's always seems very open minded and willing to, you know, see things. And he's much like yourself, like he's one of those guys that throughout the years of like researching a lot of the world issues, like he was kind of one of my go-to people. Like I would consider him like a black belt in many of these issues. And sure. And then, you know, he kind of let me down a little bit in regards to like his libertarian values in this one case. And you know, the reason I bring it up is because I do sympathize with the fact that like some people, like fear will just completely blur you from, you know, from logic. And I think a lot of people that I was upset about, you know, I was upset that they were going along with this, or the people who were screaming at others because, you know, put on your mask and this and that, or get vaccinated. You know, I'm like, I would have to remind myself, I'm like, maybe they're just afraid. Maybe they're
Yeah.
just, it's the because right now I can still find people wearing masks and they're not even wearing them correctly. There will be, I go to the gym, they're wearing it on their chin, they're wearing it below their nose. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, they're not wearing it because they think it's actually, because they're not even using it correctly. So it's not about spreading germs. I'm like, they're using it because they've been traumatized. And that mask gave them a sense of security and they feel just better with it on, even if they're not using it correctly. And I'm like, so they're just traumatized people. And that was the part that was like really eye opening to me. It was just like how you can traumatize such a huge group of the percentage of the population, and how all these people, just like the numbers constantly on the news, like cases, deaths. And even if the numbers were inflated, even if the number, obviously they were inflated and they lied about all that crap, but like, it's people just, there was so much conflicting information and there's so much doubt that people are just like, you know what, I'm just afraid. I don't know who's right and I don't want to risk it. And and this goes back to what you said about Nazi Germany. I think there's so many people that, and I'm not saying this about Scott because I love Scott, but I'm just saying there's a lot of people who in many cases, like, they look at Nazi Germany and like you said, they can't relate, they can't understand. They're like, how could this even happen? But yet now they've become an example of how propaganda and how fear and scaring you can convince the population to do things that in a normal state of mind they would never do.
Yeah, well, these correlations or these connections to modern times are a lot more stark and profound than I think people are willing to acknowledge. Like the Nazi youth, the Hitler youth movement. Like you look at the college, you look at academia today, and well, they're not militant to a large extent, but their worldview is not entirely dissimilar, and much of their vitriol, their venom, is directed towards straight white men, and obviously we know where the venom was directed from the Nazis. It was basically anyone that wasn't Aryan, but I think that it's still that same worldview that ultimately leads towards civil wars and global wars and death and destruction on a scale that's hard to fathom. And it's very concerning to me that, like, once again, this ideology, and the irony being that many of these adherents to this belief system would describe themselves as anti-fascists, and but they function in almost the exact same fashion of fascists of prior eras. And it's remarkable that if you just brand things properly, the truth of what people are participating in will totally be lost upon them. And for me to even point it out, many of them will think that I'm out of my mind, but it's like, no, I've actually studied it. Like, a lot of what you're doing is is like early stages of what the Nazi youth movement probably would have been doing too. So it's very concerning. But in Scott's defense, I know that he never was on board with lockdown. So like that to me, and certainly not in favor of the mandates. So like from my vantage point, the people that were focused or kind of diminishing safety and efficacy of the vaccine, safety and efficacy of masking for years on end, like that is forgivable. Like I can understand there was a lot of conflicting reports. If you're like, his singular focus is on like geopolitics for the most part. So I'm sure he was deep diving, the war in Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever. My job was to deep dive, that. So I can totally forgive people that were like, well, I'm going to wear a mask because I think that it might keep me safe. I'm going to get the jab because I think it might keep me safe. Like, hey, that's fine. If you wanted to force me to do those things, though, now we got problems. And I think that Scott was never the force type, so we're good.
Yeah. But one thing that was frustrating with like Abby Martins and some of the other anti-war people, and is that they're very passionate about their anti-war stance, right? Like, because it's easy to sympathize with like pictures of little kids dying,
Of course.
innocent people, dying. They're just just casualties, innocent people, and all these casualties. And yet I'm like, where's the same passion for COVID? Because like you said, like there was a lot of indirect life losses due to the lockdowns, due to the forced vaccination. In Canada, I'm sure you've seen the clip going around with Rogan and Tony Hinchcliffe talking about it, how all case mortalities have gone up. The life expectancy since 2020 has gone down 2.5 years. Edward Dowd, who used to work for BlackRock, who's done a lot of great work on this, has been documenting all the statistics and numbers showing that all case mortalities are going up since 2020. There isn't the same passion for COVID as there is for being anti-war, even though when you look at casualties, it's probably worse when you think about just the fact that everybody was forced to get
I'd say it's way worse. I think we lost more people in that than probably World War II. I mean, if you actually were able to quantify it, which I don't know if we ever will be able to, but it was, and we're still losing people because the trajectory that it put people on, kids that are killing themselves, drug addiction, suicide. I mean, there's a lot of knock-on effects or collateral damage, if you will, that is still, the tally is still running. I completely agree with you. I'm very frustrated, particularly with the leftists that are good on anti-war stuff, but got this so unbelievably catastrophically wrong. And what's really frustrating to me, because they, like a big portion of their argumentation will be lamenting income inequality. There has never been in my lifetime, maybe in human history, an event that created more income inequality than the COVID regime and the lockdown era. I mean, it was catastrophic on a scale that I can't even imagine. It was like up there with, the Russians taking farms. It was horrible. And they don't even talk about it. They don't even talk about it. They're just like, they'll get into the, myopia of mask efficacy or vaccine efficacy. But they won't even really touch on the fact that the biggest corporations in human history stole trillions of dollars from the smallest businesses in our country and all over the world. That should be completely even if you don't like capitalism, you still should hate them more than you hate the small businessmen, right? But they don't talk about it. They don't seem to care. And it just, to me, it demonstrates a lack of seriousness. Honestly, if you actually are passionate about, the poor, well, okay, what about the poor businessmen? They exist. I mean, there's lots of people that are entrepreneurs that don't make even 50 grand a year. They all got, sideswiped with your tacit approval, and you have nothing to say about it. Why? Oh no, we have a solution. It's going to be universal basic income. Oh, fucking great. Awesome. These people frustrate me to no end, truly.
Well, and giving the government more power is never a good idea. And the thing is, I think in theory, to bring back to Rogan, universal basic income, if we didn't have all the issues of government overreach, if we didn't have all the issues of creating not critical thinking children who pursue hobbies and things that they love and passions, but we have just these robots that come out of the university that we've implanted the ideas we want into them and just molded them into just mindless regurgitating info people, then maybe in a perfect world it would work, right? And maybe in a perfect world, you would say, hey, you know what, instead of you being worried about eating or paying your bills, whatever your passion is, you can focus on that now because we're giving you this income to kind of cover your living expenses, and you can just focus on those things. That's in the perfect world. But the problem is we don't live in the perfect world. No. And so it's I again, as a Rogan fan like yourself who's been listening to them for a long time, I can see that perspective and I can see that argument to be made where I wish my kids didn't have to grow up stressing about money and they could just do what they love and but if that means the government pays them and then the government says next time there's a made up virus that supposedly is going to be dangerous, then they have to get vaccinated to get that money. Now it's whoa, there's some fine print that we didn't read, and now we're stuck, and you've made us slaves to the machine. And so yeah, so I think that's the part that people don't realize. Like, again, this is why people like you and I are important to like be able to zoom out and be like, okay, just in theory, like just like the fantasy of like being a teacher and working with kids sounds great, but like what the reality of things is much different than your fantasy.
Of course. I mean, just think about, like, they haven't even begun the UBI in full. I mean, they're doing like test cases in California and other places, but they haven't even begun it. And they've already demonstrated to you what they're willing to do to political dissidents. Just look at what happened to the Canadian trucker convoy. They're going to seize their assets. They're even seize their cryptocurrency, shut down their bank accounts, shut down their credit cards. Do you think that if you're a political dissident of any stripe, that you are going to be able to survive in a country that's filled with people that are receiving UBI? Do you think that you want to live in that world where your political opinions will ultimately dictate whether or not you can eat? The answer is no. The answer is fucking absolutely not. like it is the end of human freedom. It is the end of human discourse, free speech, dialogue, debate, protest. It's the end of everything. And then add into it the mix of central bank digital currency, which is what it's going to be. It'll be CBDCs paired with UBI, 100%. That's going to be how it plays out. There are very few things I'm confident in to that extent that I would say 100%. I am 100% confident that will be, if UBI gets rolled out, it'll be paired with the CBDC eventually. And if that happens, well, then it's over. I mean, you won't be able to speak out. Anything you post on social media will be the end of your entire banking existence or your UBI stipend monthly. I mean, on top of that, every single transaction will be trackable. It's going to be the end of any semblance of human freedom on the planet. I mean, there will be the black market, which will be me and you and a handful of lunatics, and then it'll be this like digital gulag that everybody else has to languish under. So, this is why I got so frustrated. Everyone kept complimenting Andrew Yang during his presidential campaigns. Even Rogan did too. It's like, he's just so smart. And I was like, this is so fucking racist. This is such a racist declaration because he's this Asian dude that like he's saying an idea you haven't thought through, but because he's an Asian guy, you're like, this guy's a genius. I was like,
it doesn't work. If I hear a British accent, it automatically sounds smarter. So I mean, some of that,
I know, but it's racist. Like, you have to actually listen to what these people are saying. I was like, he's arguing dolled up socialism / fascism. Like, why is this an appealing concept? I don't care who the messenger is. The message sucks ass. Why are we even debating this? But I'm glad, I once again, as I had faith that Rogan would get to the right side of it, I have total faith that he will get to the right side in opposing both the central bank digital currency as well as UBI.
Well, I think him moving to Texas shows that he is concerned about government overreach and tyranny and being a real
no doubt.
So yeah, well, without a doubt. First of all, Clint, I want to apologize because just because you missed one show yesterday doesn't mean I have to make you do 3 hours worth of shows today. The time is just flew by. It just like looking at it, like, holy crap. I'm like, I've been holding this guy up for a long time, and
we went deep, man. Well, I didn't know what to expect, so I'm happy to have done it. It's been a great conversation, so thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, well, I love, well, that's, I think, one of the reasons why we both love Rogan, because it's just, I think long form conversation is important, because it's like sometimes the conversation starts in one place and then somebody brings up something that kind of takes a left turn somewhere, and then you go down that road, and that inspires some other story that inspires something else. So, sometimes the best part of a conversation is sometimes at the end. It's happened with Rogan where I'm like, I hope people get to the end of this conversation, because I'm like, the last 20 minutes is like the best part of the 3 hours. So
I couldn't agree more, dude. Like, the last 20 minutes of Liberty Lockdown is almost always my favorite part of the show, and I know like probably half of the audience didn't even hear it, and that always breaks my heart. So hopefully people will listen to this whole thing, because I think there's some gems in there.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. Well, for people listening, where are the best spots to listen to Liberty Lockdown? I know you also do a show on We Are Change, which you just had a great episode with Mel K recently, and yeah, let people know all the social media platforms you're on, the best places to keep up with your podcast and all your work, and anything else.
Appreciate it, man. At Liberty Lock Pod on X, if you guys want to subscribe or follow over there, I'd appreciate it. libertylockdown.locals.com, Liberty Lockdown on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere. Just search for Liberty Lockdown. And then the show I do with Luke Radowski is The Best Political Show. You can find that on your podcatcher, or if you go to all one word, We Are Change on either YouTube or Rumble, that's where you can find and subscribe to that. We've had Vivek Ramaswamy and a whole bunch of great guests in studio. It's kind of like a Timcast IRL Miami thing. And Luke and I are actually headed out to Iowa to be embedded with Vivek Ramaswamy's camp. I've never done anything like this before, so it's going to be very interesting to see what that process entails. I'm still trying to get a feel for whether or not I believe Vivek is as good as he is in terms of rhetoric. So that'll be a very interesting experience. So I hope people will check that out. I should be back on Timcast IRL in Iowa either Thursday or Friday next week. I've got Dave Smith on Liberty Lockdown on Saturday. I've got Tom Woods in studio for The Best Political Show on Sunday. Life is moving very rapidly, but I hope people will get on board, and appreciate you for having me, man.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, and keep up all the amazing work you're doing. We need a world full of podcasts and thinkers like yourself that are willing to go down roads, even if it goes against the people of their tribe. And Luke's awesome. I mean, Luke's another guy who he doesn't get enough respect for being an OG in the community. I remember watching
for real
YouTube videos back in the day of him confronting Henry Kissinger and whatnot. I'm like, dude, this guy's ballsy. It's he's been doing this for a real long time. And also you've been on Tim Pool. That was a great appearance on that show. And hopefully one day we'll see you on Rogan, because you've had some friends on there like Dave Smith. So hopefully we'll see
possible.
Yeah, that'd be great.
He followed me, so I feel like this is a good example for Rogan. I am capable of a 2.5 hour deep dive on a litany of topics. So hopefully he'll check it out.
Yeah, without a doubt. So and again, like, I know he gets a lot of crap from the alternative media community for being wrong in certain things, but I love the fact that there's somebody else out there who can see through that like I can, and realize that, like, hey, you know what? He gets things wrong, but it's never because he's evil or he's a part of the elite. He's just a dude who's exploring ideas and conversations, and we'll go wherever those take them. So
his heart is clearly in the right place, which is why I can forgive any wrong opinion as long as I know someone is like that. The fact that I've become, Dave Smith is actually a huge inspiration for why I got in the podcast game, because I heard him, I think the first time he was on Rogan was 2016, and I was just like, holy shit, that's me. I was like, my God, that's me on Rogan right now. And now I'm really good friends with Dave, and life is just totally surreal. And to even have Rogan follow me on Twitter is just like, I don't even know what's happening with my life. So I feel like if it's meant to happen, it'll happen eventually. And if Joe and I ever do it, I'm sure we'll become fast friends. So this life is totally surreal, man. I don't even know what I'm doing. It's crazy.
Well, none of us do, right? I was to my kids, I'm like, when I was growing up, I'm like, my parents convinced me that they had it all figured out, and I should listen to what they say because they have it all figured out, and that I should listen to my parents. And then I'm like, then I became a parent, and I realized, like, we're all just making it up as we go. Like, no idea. And I'm like, and I have no shame in telling you this. I tell my kids that. I coach kids, and I'm like, sometimes I'm going to tell you to do something, and maybe you don't listen to me, and you're right and I'm wrong. I'm like, I have zero ego. I'm like, we're all in this together. We're all figuring it out. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to get things wrong. And that's the way people should be living their lives. So
I love it. Well, it makes for a great dad. So I'm sure you're going to have some great kids for sure.
I appreciate that. And I'm sure one day you will too, and I'm sure with with podcasting and maybe your DMs are filling up, and
it'll happen. I feel like this is the decade of my life to do the whole marriage, children thing. I've been very, very focused on kind of the entrepreneurial realm for a very long time, and it's super gratifying. But I think that's to have the full human experience, I think I have to do that at some point. So we'll see.
It's the hardest job, but it's without a doubt the most rewarding and an important job. And
no doubt.
I can definitely tell that you'd be a great dad and would absolutely love the experience. So I'll be happy to hear one day when you're sharing the
little Clint's.
Yeah. Well, hey, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Thanks again for rescheduling so quickly. After yesterday's lack of internet, and hopefully we talk again in the near future. Keep up the amazing work. I'll definitely be listening, and hopefully many of my listeners will also be listening. And I'll send you the links once it's up and live.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Clint. Hey, take care.